Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Tuesday. It is May 21st, and you are locked in to the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'm your host for this week's installment. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. Hi. Welcome to the program. We're going to take you on a journey through the madness that is the world of video games. Hello. Well, it's been another 7 days since we last spoke, and a bunch of stuff has happened. Some games came out, and that's nice. It's always nice when video games, when video games are available to be played. Kind of reminds you, like, oh right, yes, that's why we're doing all of this, is because they put out video games and you play them. And so I've been playing a lot of stuff. News this week, kind of all over the place. And a bunch of Microsoft announcements that are, are they tipping their hand about the future of Xbox? I think that is my main question about some of the things that Microsoft has recently announced. But let's get into it with Senua's Sacrifice Hellblade II, which came out today. And it is the follow-up to Hellblade. It's Ninja Theory's new game that I think everyone has kind of been wringing their hands about a little bit when it comes to the recent studio closures and things happening around the world of Xbox and their owned studios. The thinking being like, well, if they just shut down, the developers of Hi-Fi Rush and all of this other stuff, like, what chance does Ninja Theory have? We cover that a little bit in the news. Sounds like that they've maybe got one or two games lined up already. So one might think that they would be safe down the line. I don't think Hellblade 2 is a very good video game. I think it is a beautiful looking video game. I think that it has really great performance capture for the kind of lead character for Senua, and there are visual moments in there. Like, it is a trippy thing because the idea is that, Senua doesn't quite have it all together, but also she's been to hell with one L and all of this other, she's had a lot going on. And so it is this very swimmy, weird, dark, ethereal, whatever, just this dreamy, nightmare-y thing, where, you're playing the game and the camera turns upside down and then there are rocks floating in the air and then it's like, oh, you're someplace else entirely. And you're left to wonder, like, is she imagining? How much of this is really happening versus how much of this is just kind of in her head? And how much of the fantastical stuff is real and all of that. But it's a lot like the first game. And I mean that in a pretty negative way. It's a lot like the first game. It is it's a lady walking around looking like this the entire time, making this face, looking at things, going, and cowering away from them. And then occasionally there are puzzle sequences where you have to line up some symbols like they were Batman Riddler puzzles, like perspective things where you kind of have to be standing in the right spot, which would be frustrating if the lock-on, like you have a focus button on the triggers, and so you are intended to focus on the symbol when you see it, and the controller starts to rumble. Like, they give you a lot of clues along the way. Parts of it are still kind of a hassle of just like lining it up, because I found that, like, when I did line it up and actually solve the puzzle, I was like, oh, these 3 trees over here that you wanted me to look at to look like this symbol don't look anything like this symbol. Like, I see why you're considering that a solution. But like, I only got there by just kind of letting the controller vibrate and pulling the trigger on it and letting it zoom in and complete the puzzle, you know, and going, all right, okay. So there will be doors, locked doors in the world where you have to go find 2 or 3 of these symbols, before it will allow you to open the door. And then it has sword fighting. They are really big on the game not having a HUD. And I don't know that a HUD necessarily would have helped it too much, but I guess my problem with the combat is that it's very mindless. It feels very empty. Like you have a light and heavy attack, you have a block, and if you time the block properly, it'll be kind of a parry sort of situation. And then you have an evade button, which will kind of, you'll crouch and get out of the way. You almost lose control of the character when you hit the A button, because you're like, oh, I just wanted to go like this, but she did a full on like, whoa, before she stood back up, and now she's out of position to counterattack anyway. So it's kind of pointless. It reminds me of Rise, Son of Rome, except that had better combat. It's a weird thing, a weird game to, but like it was just like, oh yeah, I remember that thing. That thing was terrible. And so I think the combat is really bad, and or really underwhelming. You know, like it is visually cool. You know, like you look at it and you go like, wow, this looks like a cinematic. In fact, am I playing? Like, I had a number of situations, most often when like there's an opening to the game where you're kind of climbing up rocks to get out of the ocean and make your way forward. And so it's this like kind of mindless climbing sequence. But like I'm holding up on the controller and going like, I think I need to do this. And then you let off and she keeps going for a while and then eventually stops. And you're like, oh, okay. And then I tap up on the D-pad again and that triggers the next animation and she climbs up for a while and then stops again. It's just like this. The whole game is vignetted. The whole game is letterboxed. So if you're like one of the 7 people that has an ultra widescreen monitor, I imagine it fills it up, but I don't, so I don't know. And so it doesn't do the thing where like, this is a cutscene, now you're playing. So there's like not a lot of indication as to when you are taking control of the character or when it is taking control of the character from you. It's a bizarre choice that you're just like, this sucks. Like, this feels bad, dude. Like, they're so dedicated to not having a HUD or any of these other indicators. And I just, it's a wild choice to me. So that's kind of it. And you make your way forward and you see all these gruesome, you know, you're like, oh, look at these ripped up bodies. And oh yeah. And I'm doing some ripping up bodying as well. You know, as you finish the combat, basically every combat sequence you finish, it takes control out of your hands to stab the person to death. So like you do your light and heavy attacks and you get your swipes in and whatever, and then it's like, oh, you did enough damage, now you're gonna grab his hand and go bah, blah, 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 and stick your sword through his midsection, and then another guy's gonna immediately run up and you know, you're gonna do this through like 6 or 7 dudes before another cutscene happens. You get a mirror, and I have done a really good job of putting most of the first game out of my head, so it's entirely possible that the mirror is a thing in the first game. It is kind of the one piece of HUD. She hangs it on her belt, and you see a ring around the edge start to fill up. And when it's full in combat, you can pull the focus button to basically kill the other guy. It puts everything in slow motion, and you just walk up and hit the light attack over and over again and go, bah, 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 and then you stick that fool. And then, you know, it fills the meter often enough that it almost feels like they were like, yeah, you know, if you don't like the combat and don't want to deal with it, like, you can just do this. Yeah, it'll solve. It's your combat solver. there's a big old, there are big fantastical creatures, and again, really good facial capture and performance capture stuff. And I think a lot of that looks really nice. It is a really neat looking game. The environments are, you see these vistas, these just long, like you get these long looks, these ravaged lands, and it's neat. Like that aspect of the game, like I think it looks great. Especially, I played a chunk of it on an Xbox Series X and then played a bit on PC as well. It runs totally fine on a Series X. I think it looks really nice there. All of that. I've not seen it on a Series S. I don't know what they're cutting out there performance wise or whatever. But I also had no trouble running it on PC. But my PC is more powerful than a Series X, so that shouldn't be too surprising. It's it's apparently a short game. People are saying it's about 5 hours ish, and I don't know that I'll finish it. Like I'm at a point, probably somewhere about halfway through it that I'm just like, yeah, all right. I don't like, nothing about interacting with this is engaging in any way other than it's a nice looking game. But I just, that's not enough for me at this point. I got other stuff I could be playing. There are so many other games that I could be spending time with right now. That I think again, it's on Game Pass. You should check it out. Like the universal non-review of a game on Game Pass is like, yeah, I don't know, give it a look, man. You'll probably be, at least into the way it looks, like graphically. I think it's a very, very nice looking game, and that's worth seeing. You paid money for this console, you might as well use it. Go ahead. But like, if you're thinking about purchasing it on Steam, do they want full price for this thing? I imagine they do. It is on Steam. I don't know what is the sales price. Is it it's like a full $60 thing? It's always it's 50. Okay. They know. 50 might still be a little steep, but yeah, it reminds me a lot of the first game, which I felt largely the same way about, in terms of just like, yeah, it's a pretty nice looking game, but boy, I don't want to play it. Boy, I don't want to, like, let me wander around a misty beach for a while, and there's really only one pathway forward, though occasionally they throw a couple of loops in there so you can fuck up and get lost for a little while. But it's a lot of walk forward, take the one path you can take. If there is a branch in the path, it's because there's a pillar over there that if you focus on it, it will tell you a bit of a story, and the little icons on the pillar light up as you find more of them. So that to me seems like it is the collectible, So if you occasionally see a second pathway, you're probably going to find one of those around the corner. And so you walk forward. Eventually it ends up in a more open area, and that means you're either going to solve a puzzle or do some sorting. And that's kind of that. Yeah, it's I did not find it engaging, really in any way. But a very nice looking game. I'll give them that. But yes, again, I didn't much care for the first game either, and so I'm not like shocked. Like, I can't believe I didn't like Hellblade 2. It's more like, yeah, this is kind of exactly what I was expecting it to be. They made this game again, and I'm good. I don't need more of this. You kind of, I left with that feeling of like Ninja Theory. People have fond memories of Ninja Theory for some of the things they worked on in the past, and this doesn't feel like it lines up with that legacy. Whatever. I don't know. It's very well made for what it is. I think that's the nicest thing I can say about it, is like for the thing that they seemed to set out to make, they did make it. I guess I should talk about the audio. It's a headphones kind of game. Senua constantly has voices in her head. except when you're stuck. And then suddenly it's quiet and you're like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? It said, look at the light, but like, wait a minute, what? The voices in your head are, I think it's really stupid. And it comes down a lot to the performance. Like, the concept is good because it is like basically using the voices in your head to kind of tell you what you're supposed to be doing. And so it's voices that are just like, you need to go forward. And then another voice that goes like, no, she's too scared. No, she's too scared. Oh, she needs to go forward. Oh, she's scared. Oh, she's scared. Ooh. And so it's like these two kind of competing voices. And the thing they do that's kind of neat, that a lot more games don't really do this. Like not a lot of games do this, I think. They put all of the voices in your head behind you. You know, so they say, hey, you should wear headphones. And it's because they're trying to put all of the voices behind you. And so it's like you have these two whispering voices in your head, and then you have the voice of your father who's just there to tell you that you ain't shit. And so like they'll go like, oh, you need to stand up and fight. Be careful now, Senua. And then this voice comes on and he says, you'll never do it, Senua. You're a dog shit lady. You can't do a damn thing. You're terrible. You're the worst. And it's neat that it is, you know, in kind of the back half of your head in terms of audio placement and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't think they do it once and you're like, okay, cool. I don't want to hear any of this ever again. Meanwhile, there's a light, a torch you're supposed to focus on. There's like weird little stuff, like there's a torch that you're supposed to be focusing on. And it says like, that light's anyway, look at the light. And I'm like, I'm looking at the fucking light. What the fuck? And then like, okay, I'm going to walk right up to this light and I'm going to pull the focus trigger because, okay, I'll focus, Senua. You need to focus on the light. Focus on the light. And you're like, oh, right, the button, focus. And I'm pulling it and I'm staring at this thing and all the voices go away because they've told me everything they have to tell me. What they wanted me to look at was some rocks off to the side. And you're like, well, what the hell? The voices led me astray. There's another situation where there's a torch that you can pick up, which you have not done in the game up to that point. You haven't really interacted with any objects whatsoever. And so it's this loop. You can kind of run in circles forever, and you'll find like there's a blocked door that is like, your father doesn't want you to walk through this door. You'll never go there. And then there's like a little light around the corner. You're like, do I need to stand in the light to gain power from it and focus and then run and make it over there? Does that work? But no, it turns out if you just get close to it and hit the button, she will pick up the torch. And you're like, oh, okay, I can pick this up. Weird. So like there's little bits and pieces of it where it's like they, in pursuit of being cinematic, in pursuit of being HUDless, all of these other things, like that would be a very easy idea to convey to a player of just like, yeah, there's hit the fucking A button, dumbass. Even if they had a voice in there, because the voice says like, oh, the light is a respite, the respite. You're like, okay, so I'm taking respite here, and now what? Like they for as handholdy as the voices do sometimes get, they could have had one of the voices say, take the torch with you. You're like, oh, okay, right, yeah, okay. So I think they flub a lot of the stuff they're trying to accomplish with that by some of those things being a little uneven. And again, I think the combat is just like dead dumb, just like, why? I don't want to do this. And so Hellblade 2 is out now. Again, if you are a Game Pass subscriber, you might as well check it out, because what else are you doing with that subscription? Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some other video games. Stay tuned. Did you know that a big part of the quality of your sleep depends on your temperature at night? That's right. And that's why you need to check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. And that helps you get better sleep every single night. But that's not all. That silver infusion also helps the sheets to be self-cleaning. That means they prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. That helps keep the stink away, and that's just nice, you know? Just nice. On top of that, they are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Keep the gunk off your body. You know, bacteria can clog your pores, it'll cause breakouts and acne. Stay clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use the promo code Jeff at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. It's crazy. It's deals. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff at checkout to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Jeff to treat yourself. And thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring the episode. Diablo IV recently received a new update. They started their new season. This has been one of the, I guess, probably the most anticipated patch that they have done to Diablo IV thus far. It is like Loot 2.0, or, you know, like they have reworked a lot of the loot in the game. And so I spent some time with that, both with a new seasonal character as well as with my existing, my first character that I beat the game with, and all of that. And I kept getting loot that was way worse than everything I had. The idea is being that, like, they want to have like fewer affixes on the swords and stuff, but they're more powerful, and you have you gain the ability to yet another ability to modify weapons, which they already had a form of that in there, and now they've added a new one where you can go roll some dice and it will throw a different type of bonus on it, and you can choose like basically from groups of 4, and you go like, okay, well, it'll be one of these 4, and if you don't like it, you can re-roll it, but you can only re-roll it 3 times before the item becomes locked. Like, okay, this doesn't. I read all the stuff leading up to the patch, and they're like, we want more freedom and builds, and we want to have like the loot be more meaningful, and so we're gonna have less loot. And you're like, that's okay, all right, I guess. But the loot will be more meaningful and better. You're like, okay, yeah. And so I loaded it up and played a bunch, and it, eventually I went into a Helltide and bought some gloves with some Helltide cinders, whatever the hell that currency is called. And I did get something that had a higher item level than the items I had equipped. And then by breaking down items, you earn more of the things you can choose to put back onto your other items. And it's, I think some of the modification stuff for gear in Diablo 4 was already a little bit convoluted. And I don't know that adding like yet another system in there was actually the right answer. I don't know that I felt like I was having like a blast with it, where I'm like, yeah, I'm having a great time now. Like it did not feel markedly different. I was kind of hoping that like, oh yeah, if the loot is better, that would be cool. But it just, maybe I'm just not getting the right drops or whatever. But like it doesn't feel like a dramatic difference. Maybe that's the sort of thing that you have to be like pretty far into the Diablo 4 hole to notice and care about it. Maybe I'm like, oh, well, I'm only level 60. I'm only on world tier 3. So who cares about me over here? I don't, maybe that's the problem, but Yeah, it did not feel like an immediate, like, oh my God, this is now we're talking Diablo. Now I'm interested in all of this end game stuff. Like it really didn't change, didn't change any of that stuff. Maybe the seasonal content is better. Like I'll spend a little bit more time with that probably one of these days here, to see if that stuff is improved. But the promise of like massive loot overhaul and everything, like, it is a little bit lost on me as someone who, you know, finished the game before the first season really started, and you know, kind of felt like I had my fill of it because the end game stuff didn't seem all that fun. Yeah, the I don't feel like I'm gaining meaningful amounts of power. I'm feeling like, oh, now I'm crushing dudes and murdering fools, and this is a great time. Like it just doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe I'll spend a little bit more time with that and see if it goes anywhere. I have played a little bit of a game. How much is Mullet Madjack? Let's find out here, because that's a meaningful. Looks like it's $18. Oh, I'm sorry, there's no space. It's not Mullet Madjack, it's Mullet Madjack. It's a first-person shooter, I guess I would say. It is the setup is basically you live on a 10-second timer, and every time you kill someone, you gain time, 1 or 2 seconds, and you have to make it to the end of the level before time expires, or you die. And so you are frantically running, sliding, dashing, kicking, and shooting your way through these relatively short corridors to get from point A to point B before time runs out. And then when you hit the end, you get a fresh 10 seconds and you go and do it again. There's a bit of a roguelike thing going on there where you pick a perk at the end of every level, and so you can change out weapons or go like, oh, if you shoot enemies in the nuts, you'll get an extra 2 seconds. You're like, okay, well, now I'll aim low. Or a headshot for extra 2. And well, now I can aim low, or I can aim high. It has kind of an anime-ish. Anime might be giving it too much credit. It's got like it's got that sort of 80. It is like bootleg 80s anime. It is like someone making fun of 80s anime. Like, it is evocative of that style, but not in a way that feels especially genuine. Because it's too sharp. Like, the visuals are too clean in a lot of cases. It's got the feel of someone sat down and decided that they still liked that vaporwave aesthetic and tried to integrate that into a thing. And I don't think they really pull off. Like, it is superficially like 80s anime, but it is not actually like 80s anime, I guess I would say. If you care about that distinction, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, I guess. But it is well animated, and it looks nice and sharp. Like, when you will find cleavers and knives in the level, and that gives you the ability to do kind of a finishing move on enemies, where you'll just walk up to them and pull both triggers, and you'll just go, you'll punch them and embed the cleaver in their robot skull, and get some bonus time and keep moving. It's a really neat idea. It is nicely frantic. It is not, like when you finish the first like 10 levels, the first thing it does is go like, oh, there are more levels. And you're like, okay, of course there are. And after playing about 10 levels of it, I started to feel like I maybe had my fill with it conceptually, because Mullet Madjack, at least in the first hour or two of gameplay, it's pretty repetitive. Like, and you're frantically moving through these areas so quickly that you're not like stopping to think tactics or stopping to think like, oh, well, or to get a look at the environment. Like, there are environmental kills, and so if you get close to an enemy, you can kind of kick them, and you can kick them into a vending machine or a fan, or there's like little things along the way, and so as you start to notice these things in the environment, or you start to guess like, oh, they're probably standing in front of a thing I can kick them into because this guy spawned close to a wall. And so I found myself just kind of like mashing buttons and not really taking too much time to aim. I was playing with a controller, and like the aiming is really easy. Like if you want to hit dudes in the nuts or the head or whatever for bonus time, like that was not exceptionally difficult to do. But I only played through like level 15 or something like that. So, it's always the case that, maybe it does get more difficult later on. But it's a very neat idea. I think they execute it pretty well. It has a very, it does have a very unique look. I don't necessarily love the look of it, but it stands out. It stands out quite a bit. So it definitely has that going for it. The tone of it is, it's very like cyber future influencers. Like the princess influencer who has 2 billion followers has been kidnapped and taken to floor 10, and you've got to get up there and get her. And the idea, the reason the timer exists is because you're being live streamed. And so your endorphins, or you basically, you get more likes, you get more dopamine, and that gives you more time to live, is kind of the framing for it. It's dumb. But in a way that I think works better than that sounds. It is not like it's not like the Borderlands 3 take on influencers. How about that? It's dumb fun, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but a good little time. So give Mullet Madjack a look. Go watch the trailer or something like that, and maybe it's for you. It is neat. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut came out on PC. I don't know that I have too much to say about that I haven't already said about the game on other platforms. This is a great game. Ghost of Tsushima is awesome. And also, it is a game where I spent so much time doing side stuff the first time around that I reached a point with it where I didn't even want to finish the main game because I had played so much of it at that point that I was like, okay, all right. So my advice to people playing the game for the first time is to, make your way through the game. Don't necessarily sit there and like maybe you want to go back and get your platinum trophy or whatever you want to do, but don't do that up front because you're gonna just ruin the entire game. Because a lot of that side stuff is good fun gameplay stuff, but not necessarily where the story is per se. Though there's bits and pieces of story in the side quests, and some of that stuff's good, some of that stuff's not so good. But I burned out on it real quick. Or no, not even real quick. Like I played a fuckload of that game and burned out on it because I spent so much time doing all of that side stuff that when it came time to actually go do the main things, I was like, this is way less interesting from a gameplay perspective than it is than the other stuff I've been doing. And so my advice is to just keep it balanced, keep moving forward. It's a very nice looking game. Sign up for your PSN account if you haven't already. This is also our first look at the PlayStation overlay, which I believe is like Shift F1 while the game is running. And it's a very it's a very straightforward thing that like will show you your PSN friends list, your trophies. My saves didn't come in. I thought it was supposed to be cross save, but maybe it is not. I was under the assumption that it was cross save, but it did not pull any save for me to start with. but it's a really nice looking game. It was a great looking game on console. It still looks great here. It seems like a really solid port. The PSN integration, I think that's nice. I think again, I think that we should like cross-play wherever possible, cross-save wherever we can. I think that's got to be the way forward, especially for these kind of bespoke little multiplayer modes that might be really interesting and unique and fun to engage with, but like they're not going to be massive multiplayer hits, and so you might find yourself in a situation where it's hard to find players for some modes like this. Like it has the Legends mode, which is like a co-op mode that I haven't played any on PC, but I did play some of that back when it launched on console, and it's a neat mode. It's fun. It's a good time. But you're going to need friends, or you're going to need to hope that there are other people playing. And so this is the whole reason this PSN integration exists on PC, is to make it crossplay. And good on them for doing it. All games should be crossplay. Like it's 2024. I still, I'm sure that someone could probably gin up a reason why this still exists and make it make sense. But I still think it's really weird that games allow you to turn crossplay off. And I think it's really, I feel like most of the complaints I've seen from players about crossplay are really whiny, like dumb. They're usually just like for competitive reasons. They're like, I don't want to play with this is that, and it's like, if you're unhappy with certain types of, like, oh well, people can cheat on the PC. It's like, maybe. Are you sure? Or are you just bad at it? Like obviously, like I think players need to, like games and studios need to be better about anti-cheat and making sure that all of their stuff is running on the up and up. That's certainly the case. You have to be on top of that if you're going to do a multiplayer game. But yeah, I don't know. Crossplay crossplay is the right answer. Especially for Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle Chomp Champs, a game that just launched across multiple platforms, and I don't think a single human is playing it. But it has crossplay. I believe Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle Chomp Champs is a game that originally debuted on Stadia. And, well, now you can't play that. So they were able to release it onto other platforms. It is sort of they want this to be a Pac-Man Battle Royale kind of game where you have your maze and you are eating dots and ghosts and doing Pac-Man things. And then tunnels to other mazes will open up around the edges, and you can go into the other mazes and eat their dots and eat their power pellets. And if you are power pelleted up, if you are pilled up, you can eat other Pac-Mans as well as other ghosts. Someone in chat here says Steam Charts says that Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle Chomp Champs has 4 players right now. That's all you need. What do you need? More than 4? No. It is not a great implementation of like there's some take on Pac-Man, like Pac-Man 99, like there is some take on Pac-Man as a big multiplayer thing with like competitive eating each other gameplay. That's more than 4 players. That's more than, that is a big high player count game. There is some idea there that would work and be good. I don't think this is it. I also think it's really ugly. I think they did Pac-Man real dirty on this. You can skin like if you're pre-ordering the game, I think they also are selling some skins or something. So it's like you can get a Dig Dug skin and look at all you can put Dig Dug's hat and Puka's glasses onto Pac-Man, and you decorate up your own Pac-Man. I don't think any of it looks good. And yeah, it it didn't seem like a game that did especially well on Stadia. Not that anything did, but here it really feels like a game that just kind of launched and was immediately forgotten about. I feel like I am literally the only person talking about Pac-Man Megatunnel Battle Chomp Champs. No, that's not true. I saw that Kinda Funny was doing a sponsored stream for Pac-Man Megatunnel Battle Chomp Champs. So I'm not the only person talking about Pac-Man Megatunnel Battle Chomp Champs. It's not great. It's not great. I was looking forward to it in a sick way, because I think that, again, they did that arcade game. There was like a 4-player like tabletop game that was really fun in that context of all 4 of you there locally eating each other and all of that. That was a good game. This game does not feel like it's expanding on those concepts in smart ways or meaningful ways or ways that make me want to come back to it. So I played, I think, 1 or 2 games of Pac-Man Megatunnel Battle Chomp Champs, and I think I'm okay on it. I might say you could probably skip out on Pac-Man Megatunnel Battle Chomp Champs. Last thing here before we get to news. So RetroArch, the emulation front end that plays games on a lot of different platforms, finally rolled out on iPhone. If you remember, Apple did change its rules around emulators, and so we're seeing kind of a handful of emulators hitting the App Store officially now. There are restrictions in place still that make certain types of emulators not possible. Newer systems like a GameCube or Dreamcast or that sort of stuff is gonna kind of prevent you from doing some things. But this iOS version of RetroArch is very capable of playing, let's say, everything up to PlayStation 1. Or not everything. Some cores are not there because of licensing reasons. Like it's very particular about what it allows you to play. It is a subset of the systems that you could play if you had RetroArch on, say, an Android phone or a PC, or I think even if you had side-loaded a crazy version of RetroArch from their website, because they've had an iOS version for a very long time now. So anyway, this came out, and I've started messing with it more and more, and it's kind of become my emulator of choice on iPhone for now. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to keep messing with this, I should probably get a different controller situation going on again. And so on a whim, I bought another one of these fucking Backbone controllers. I tried one of these out years ago now because they sent one over a while back. And I came to realize right out of the gate that they want you to take the case off of your phone in order to fit their controller thing on. And that is a full-on deal breaker in my book. Like, absolutely not. I'm not going to sit here and like finesse the case off my phone every single time I want to put the controller shell on. They have addressed that. That was what led me to finally go like, all right, they've addressed it here. They have basically these little clips on the inside of it here, if you're watching the video version, are like magnetized in there, and they comes with 2 different versions of the clips. And so it is compatible, at least with the official Apple case. If you've got some fucking weird case, I don't, God help you. Otter box, whatever the hell you're doing. But like, it snaps in relatively easily. Buttons and D-pad, I bought the PlayStation themed version of the controller, and the buttons feel, I guess, nominally like a DualSense controller. There's a big problem with this, though, that I wish I would have bought a Game Sir, which sounds like maybe it's an okay controller, but there's a button on here that has the Backbone logo on it. and it is the equivalent of a menu button. So if you're using this for remote play on PlayStation or Xbox or whatever else, like this button here will kind of be your Xbox button. If you hold it down for a few seconds and let go. If you tap the button, it will try to launch the Backbone application. And if you don't have it installed, it will pop up a thing that says, you don't have the Backbone app installed. Do you want to install it? And it'll let you go to the App Store and install it. I went ahead and installed it. And they want you... So they've got some kind of fucking subscription service for games with this fucking thing, which is annoying as someone who just wants a goddamn controller. And so I installed the app and it's like, okay, sign up for your account and now give us your phone number. And I'm like, this is a fucking controller, dog. Stop asking me for shit. Fuck off. So I gave it a fake phone number that gets text messages so that I could do, I went through all of that hassle. And then now it's just like an ad for their subscription service. Every time you push the button, it launches the app and it's like, do you want Backbone Plus? I'm like, fuck no, I do not. I'm here to play Mario's Picross on Game Boy and nothing else. So I uninstalled the app. And now it just every time. So even on holds. So in RetroArch, to get the menu to come up, you got to hold this button down for a couple seconds and let go of it. But even then, the menu will pop up and it will pop up the iOS like error window that's like, hey man, do you want to go to the App Store and install the Backbone app? And you have to hit ignore basically every single time. And that sucks ass. That is total ass. Even with the app installed, it still always launches the app. And I don't want to launch the app, so I definitely can't have it installed. There's nothing in the app that lets you remap this button or say like, hey, don't do this. Hey, never do this. Hey, I never want to launch this app. Hey, please don't ever do this. There's nothing for me here. I don't want to do this. But you need a menu button. And there are ways in RetroArch to go around that if you want to use, like, you hit select and start and both triggers are like the things that you might accidentally hit while playing a game. You can set something like that up. So that would be the workaround if you really wanted to beat this. But I don't want to beat this. I want a fucking functional fucking menu button. And the motherfuckers at Backbone instead are charging $100 for a controller that wants to really hammer home that you should install this fucking app. And that sucks. It's a nice controller, but that sucks. So there are a couple of other controllers out there that are like, Razer has one, and then there's this Game Sir, which sounds fancy. Hello, Game Sir. And the Game Sir, I believe, has like Hall effect joysticks and all this other insane shit. I would be more interested in, I don't know. I'm hesitant. Razer is well known for also making you jump through a bunch of hoops when it comes to their hardware. So maybe the Razer Kishi is not bad in this specific way. It looks like a decent controller, but also I'm not going to go spend more hundreds of dollars on more mobile controllers. I like this. So I like the idea of, like, if I'm going to do this, right? If I'm going to play games on a phone this way, I like the idea of this, of the thing on the side of it that is like, okay, this is now solid. What I don't like is, here's a weird piece of 3D printed plastic that like bolts around your controller, and also you can clamp your phone into it, and you'll Bluetooth it or whatever, and it'll be fine. I don't want one of those weird setups. Also, I found that when I was Bluetoothing a PlayStation 5 controller to my phone, it was dropping some inputs off the D-pad, at least in Mario's Picross, which I admit is not the most responsive game in the world, but it was fucking me up. And I can't stand for that. I'm playing Mario's Picross over here. It's serious business. RetroArch iOS it's a decent version of it. Again, it is limited compared to the kind of full-fledged versions you'll find on other platforms, which I'm sure is causing like non-stop customer support shit for them, because it's just a bunch of people going like, hey, I heard this played Dreamcast games. How do I make that work? And then someone having to step in over and over again and being like, no, actually it doesn't. I mean, it does, but not here, not this way. If you do this, then maybe, but like, this is obviously beyond you. You're not going to be able to go do this. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird situation with these iOS emulators, because the limitations are still less than ideal, you know. But one thing they're rolling out in the iOS version of RetroArch and the, I guess, the Apple TV version are the first two versions to have it, is they're rolling out like a native cloud syncing solution. And I believe this will eventually be in all versions of RetroArch, but for now it's only in those two. And basically you can set up a WebDAV server, and every time you launch the emulator or every time you quit out of a game, it will sync your saves to this WebDAV, to your WebDAV server. So I'm like, I can do that. And so I opened up Docker and I'm like, give me a WebDAV server. And it did. And now I can sync these saves. It's kind of one of the things about emulation for me that always kind of prevents me from spending a ton of time with an individual game, is I always lose the saves at some point. I always like, oh, I blew away this directory because I was reinstalling the emulator, and oh, there were some saves in there. Oh, well, whatever. And it just it never inspires me to play games all the way through. So the idea of like a good built-in cloud syncing solution that I can control myself, because it's a WebDAV server here running on the machine in my garage, that's kind of awesome. And between that and retro achievements, I feel like that's kind of the thing that sort of has driven me to like get more out of emulation kind of overall. Retro achievements, you know, more directly, I think, than syncing saves, but you know, syncing saves is still kind of a new thing. At least in terms of a built-in solution. That obviously you could, you know, it's a directory on a PC. You can back it up. You can sync it somewhere else. You can copy it around. Like people have been writing scripts and coming up with different ways to sync their save directories in emulators for years. But it's nice to have something built in. And I hope that stuff rolls out to other versions of the emulator sooner rather than later, because that's very handy. And now it means that my Mario Picross save is locked to this phone, and so I can't really play anywhere because it's backing up the saves, but no other platform can read the saves yet. So, but I will get all the retro achievements in Mario's Picross. You'll see. You'll all see. Why don't we get into some news? In the news, I've cracked open this case of Bawls that was sent into the P.O. box, and discovered that it was cans. They put Bawls in cans now. I thought it was going to be a bunch of glass bottles. This isn't going to go on the list because it has 190 calories, but it is still a can of original Bawls. There's some cherry balls. It's like a variety pack. And so I thought I would drink some Bawls. Whenever I think of Bawls, the drink, I am reminded of the week I spent as a guest co-host on G4's Attack of the Show with one Kevin Pereira. He was a good dude. Because that week they had gone out to some LAN party, or they had gone to some esports event. Insofar as there were esports events in 2006 or 5 or whenever it was. And they did a bit where they had taken like a mesh, like a netting, and they had put 2 like balls in it full of fluid or something. And they were walking around peddling what they called sack. And so it was Kevin Pereira and a microphone and this contraption that looked like balls, in a more literal sense, getting esports professionals such as a shirtless fatality to guzzle from Kevin Pereira's sack. That's the bit. I don't know. It was good. It was it's 20 years ago. That's good. That's good shit. That's good early 2000s shit. And so they have a bunch of footage of people drinking sack. And so every time I am confronted with the continued existence of Bawls, I am always thinking of sack. This smells like balls. This tastes like balls. This is exactly how I remember balls tasting. It's effervescent. It's kind of nice. It's light. But it is a strange flavor. I don't really remember Balls really having much going for it in the energy department. As much as they marketed it as an energy drink, I don't remember it doing much for me on that front. But here we are. Case of Balls. Let's get into the news. As I said at the top of the show, there's a report going around saying that Ninja Theory has at least one more game lined up, but apparently two. This is according to Windows Central, who was covering they put out a message, like a Ninja Theory put out a post saying like, hey, it's just making video games is hard. Like it's a Twitter screenshot of text saying like, thanks for checking out our game, and all of that stuff. Such as making video games is difficult. Much like Senua, we as a team have been guided by a conviction to achieve our quest to make a game that sinks you deep into Senua's world and to take you on a journey that leaves you thinking and feeling. All right. Anyway, Windows Central was covering that, and then just as a little throwaway line in here, it says, we can confirm via our trusted sources that in addition to Project Mara, which is a horror-themed game that was announced back in 2020, Ninja Theory's next game has already been greenlit. There are no plans whatsoever to close the studio anytime soon. To which I'll just say this. No one plans to close a studio until it's time to close a studio. But if their sources are reporting that they have 2 games in the pipeline, it seems likely that we'll at least see one of those make the light of day. Studio closures going forward for them, it's hard to imagine them doing much more of it. But I would have said that about the mere idea of closing Arcane in the first place. Like, that's fucking wild. Tango, I could see it. I could see that happening. That's you think about it, you're like, okay. Like Hi-Fi Rush is a really great game, but it's smaller than the games that studio tended to make, and blah blah blah. Like, you could think it through in your head and go like, I can. But also, Arcane had been pitching more Dishonored from the sounds of things, and I think Tango was set to go on to. Well, we saw some leaked doc that made it look like that they were thinking about a Ghostwire Tokyo 2, and I know that there was talk about Evil Within 3 at one point, but I don't know how far any of that stuff really got. But so yeah, so for what it's worth, it sounds like Ninja Theory has 1 or 2 more games lined up, and we'll see where that we'll see how that goes, I guess. Nintendo has acquired a studio from the Embracer Group, which is not a sentence you would expect to hear. They purchased Shiver Entertainment, which is based in Miami. Shiver was bought by the Embracer Group back in 2021, according to IGN.com. And Nintendo was going to be acquiring it. Shiver did some ports of Switch games. Some of them relatively well received. Like I remember hearing that the Switch port of the Harry Potter game was like pretty well done for what it was, and they did that. They did Mortal Kombat 11, which was a decent port of that game, but they also did Mortal Kombat 1, which was real bad. It was real bad. Anyway, Nintendo has acquired that studio. So yeah, they're known for porting games to the Switch, and I wonder if they are going to. So you know, you got to think about like third party relations on the Switch, third party publishing on the Switch has been fine. There's been a ton of smaller games, you know, the indie flow on the Switch is fucking immense. And the bigger games have kind of come in spurts, and they haven't always been great. You occasionally get a really good Switch port, and you're like, wow, that's, you know, like that sure is Overwatch. Look at that, huh? And then you end up with like a Mortal Kombat 1, or I don't know, like Doom Eternal. But you know, have been games across the Switch's portfolio that you go like, there's some good ports, there's some bad ports, for sure. I wonder, and that's going to be down to the studio, you know, that's doing the work, and basically, you know, a studio publishing a game across the, you know, multiple platforms might go find a studio to do the port work for Switch. But I wonder if this is a situation where Nintendo will potentially offer this as an option, kind of have it in their back pocket to say like, hey, we really want this game on our platform and we will port it for you if you're not going to. You know, like we will have Shiver do it to make sure that it ends up on our platform, and presumably they will end up getting resourced properly here. They put out a press release here that doesn't have a ton here. It says Shiver is a video game development company that develops software for multiple platforms. Established in 2012, partner with publishers and developers through commissions for large-scale title developments, and recently has worked on porting software such as Hogwarts and Mortal Kombat 1. Nintendo will acquire 100% of the outstanding shares. Going forward, even after it becomes a part of the Nintendo Group, Shiver's focus will remain the same, continuing commissions that port and develop software for multiple platforms, including Nintendo Switch. Huh. So they would be open to doing ports to non-Nintendo platforms. That's sort of weird. That's sort of weird. But so my thinking is that like as they get ready to roll out the Switch 2, and as they get out there and start beating the drum for another set of hardware, and trying to get third parties excited about putting more games out on the Switch 2 than maybe they did on Switch 1, that this would be that this is probably the move, right? And this is something that Sony did in some, I want to say some Vita games or whatever. Like there were definitely like situations where in the PS4 era where Sony was like, hey, you know, we can hook you up with this. They didn't have a studio in-house that necessarily did that stuff, but they did have resources that they could allocate to make sure that these ports came out properly. You know, to do like, oh, we'll hook you up with this dev that's going to do this. This studio can do the work, and we can get all this together to make sure that your wholly third-party game, not something like XDev that's more like, you know, more focused on like a second party, whatever you want to call it, but like not necessarily games that Sony published, you know, games that were published by third party that they managed to get onto platforms like the Vita because they were kind of acting as that kind of entity in the middle that could like, okay, here, hook up with this, hook up with this studio and do this and whatever else. I wonder if Shiver is going to kind of act in that capacity here, where they'll be on hand. And also it says multiple platforms, including Nintendo Switch. That might just mean the Nintendo Switch and the follow-up to the Nintendo Switch, and not like Xbox. You know what I mean? Since they can't necessarily come out and say, yes, there's a new this, there's a new that. That might be their roundabout way of saying that without saying that. In more acquisition news, IGN, your friends at Snowball, have gone out and acquired some more video game websites. You know, Ziff Davis. Man, what I always forget that IGN is technically Ziff Davis now. Such a weird. They have acquired the Gamer Network, not to be confused with the Gamers Network with a U, which I think is still out there, or did they shut? I forget, whatever it was. That is the UK-based group of publications that includes GamesIndustry.biz, Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG 24/7, and Dicebreaker, according to GamesIndustry.biz. Who would know? The Gamer Network business also holds shares in sites such as, or entities such as, Outside Xbox, Digital Foundry, and a further subsidiary called Hookshot, which operates Nintendo Life, Push Square, Pure Xbox, and Time Extension. So they won't own all of Time Extension or anything like that, but they will control, or they won't own all of Digital Foundry because yeah. It's a weird web of sites and networks and all of this stuff. All of these sites were previously owned by ReedPop, which is the company that controlled PAX. And so these are, when ReedPop bought the Gamer Network, they controlled, gosh, what was it? It was EGX, which was a trade show in the UK. But ReedPop is largely an event business. They didn't want to own. I get the impression that they did not ever especially want to own any of these publications, and certainly did not know how to run these publications, especially as their event business started to dry up and suddenly, because of the pandemic, like they've been hurting for a while. I get the impression that these sites have been either on the chopping block or the shopping block. That's not a thing. For a very long time. So maybe not the most surprising thing that Reed was looking to get out of that business. My impression is that they have not been interested in the journalism stuff for a while, but yeah, they just wanted to buy, because since Eurogamer controlled EGX and some of the other event business stuff, they wanted that. Some cuts have been made. I have only heard of one, and that is one Brendan Sinclair, who was at GamesIndustry.biz, the cool voice of Canada himself. I'll just say, I think if you're letting someone like Brendan Sinclair walk out the door, you're fucking up. Like, even if, Alice Bell from Rock Paper Shotgun? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had only seen Brendan, but yeah, I figured there had to be more. Brendan's been at this for a very long time. He is, one of the best out there doing it. I think some of the stuff he has written for GamesIndustry.biz has been, he is one of the few people out there that I feel like is really taking publishers to task in his writing. When it comes to whether it's free to play or obviously like the Web3 stuff kind of came and went, but when that was all the rage, he has always been a very sharp mind, and has been writing like a here's what happened 10 years ago column for probably like 10 years, for a very long time, that was always really insightful. And obviously times are tough across the board, so it's not simply as easy as like move this guy over, but like he should be writing for IGN. Like in this acquisition, like he should be someone that they should have said, hey, how about we put this guy on IGN instead of just leaving him on GamesIndustry.biz. But instead they let him go. Also, it's kind of a funky acquisition any acquisitions like this are always funky when you're taking publications and buying them up, and because IGN has a UK, like there's like IGN UK still exists, right? I mean, there's regional IGN all over the place. So the idea of buying a UK centric network of sites is weird, but like, you know, the thing to remember is that like you don't buy these sites to shut them down and integrate them, or you're not buying the competition to shut them down and laugh or whatever. That was always my short-sighted view of acquisitions back in the day, and this is something that, like, you know, Vince Brody put me up on game. Because I was talking about like, oh, you know, because there was a lot of acquisitions back then, and it was like, oh, well, what would happen if GameSpot bought IGN? And he's like, well, you know, I've told the story before, but he said, if GameSpot bought IGN, you wouldn't shut down, or vice versa. You would not shut down IGN. You would run both. You would own Coke and Pepsi, you know, and benefit from that. So owning all these other sites gives them more pages to put ads on for their sales team to sell. IGN's sales team, I'm going to guess, is probably better and more seasoned than whatever these sites have been working with. But also the ad business is in such a fucking funk right now. That it's, you know, it's a different it's a different game than it was even 5 years ago, let alone 10. IGN has at times had huge networks of sites. Remember when they bought GameSpy, they got all the Planet sites, and suddenly IGN owned Planet Quake and Planet Tony Hawk and a zillion different websites. And over time, they eventually, when times got tough, they shut them down. Because they couldn't afford to keep all that stuff open. And, you know, like GameSpy was running on its own for a bit there. And I think Matt Rory worked there for like, 9 days before they decided to shut GameSpy down. Yeah, I don't know. Like the network approach to having a ton of different websites, in some weird way is actually a big part of IGN's legacy. They have done that for years, and, you know, not so much lately, but now it's almost like they're kind of back in it in a weird way. And I wonder if it will go any differently this time for them. I don't know. It's hard to really think this stuff through, because I don't know what IGN's financials look like these days. Was it about a year ago? Because IGN laid people off. No, I guess that wasn't that wasn't Summer Games Fest. That was around the time of the Game Awards that they did layoffs. I remember because I was at the Game Awards talking to someone at IGN the day that a bunch of people got laid off. That wasn't this year. That was maybe the year before, though. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Point being, IGN has had layoffs in this recent kind of financial climate already. And I bet that there are people there that feel that they could use more people on staff to cover more topics. Like, I think IGN's news is really good these days. They have like some really solid reporting. Like they are picking up the phone and making calls and digging. And that's something that a lot of sites stopped doing at a certain point, and they have good people there in those positions doing that stuff. And boy, oh boy, someone like Brendan Sinclair would have been a great fit if if they were looking to merge some staffs or doing some stuff like that. Like I think that dude is fantastic. Worked with him back at GameSpot years ago. Full disclosure, I guess. And yeah, one of the best. So hopefully, I say hopefully someone picks him up, but like who's left? Who's out there, man? Like that's the sort of the spooky thing about all this stuff is that it still feels like all of these things are collapsing when it comes to the idea of the traditional video game website. Like I said, I don't know what IGN's financials are. Maybe it's a situation where they will be the last one standing in some weird way. But But I don't know. In terms of like massive, I think a lot of the, the smaller, we will continue to see more of these smaller sites kind of coming along and, kind of author owned independent stuff like, Aftermath and, Remap and VGBs and all that sort of stuff. That's just fun to say. These VGBs. But in terms of like the kind of old guard, check out our video game website kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. There were reports going around last week. It was a weird. It's a weird thing to claim as news. Wall Street Journal reported that this year's Call of Duty will be on Game Pass, which there had been a little bit of kind of speculation about, but also that's not news. It would be news if it wasn't coming to Game Pass, because Microsoft's stated position is that its games will come to Game Pass on day one. And so if they were to break with that specifically for Call of Duty because they thought they could make more money another way, that would be news. That would be, I think, horrendous news. But Wall Street Journal is reporting that it will be included in the service. There's been some talk kind of swirling around after that it is likely that the Game Pass service will see some kind of overhaul or they will take another look at their offering around that time. I don't know if that means they raise prices or because they're still charging, like they just kind of revamped it a little bit with the Game Pass core thing, but will they merge the PC and console tiers or just like find a different way to carve it up or something? I don't know. And so, yeah, it's this weird situation where like that's not news, but also, but I don't, what do they do with Game Pass in terms of, like what are the, a lot of this reporting or a lot of this discussion around Call of Duty, maybe not on Game Pass, was coming alongside some additional reporting saying that a lot of the kind of weird rush to monetize on the Xbox side of things is coming from outside the Xbox group, that there's pressure from on high for them to turn it around immediately and start making some money, which would lead to them making some really unfortunate short-sighted decisions that I think would hurt their business overall. But that's a lot of the multi-platform stuff maybe comes from that is what some of the stuff going around has been claiming. And that some of this Call of Duty talk was maybe coming from the same place or coming from the same desire to like, hey, we just spent billions of dollars on this thing. We need to get as much money out of it as we can right now, because what the fuck are we doing? But so I guess this report that it will be included in Game Pass is interesting, but also, will Game Pass be revamped in such a way that is suddenly slightly less attractive? Will they carve up Call of Duty in a weird way that changes things a little bit, or what will they? I think that I could see them doing a tiered, and I think Call of Duty is the only game I would do this with. You could maybe make a similar argument for something like Minecraft or something, but GTA Online has a subscription service. Like you can subscribe to GTA Online and you will get like a stipend of in-game credits, and a few other perks along the way. I could see them doing a separate tier of Game Pass that is like, hey, yeah, you get the game. The Minecraft does kind of have a thing like that as well. Minecraft was the other game I was thinking of that could maybe support this, in terms of just like things that Microsoft has that maybe go above and beyond Game Pass. Like, is there a scenario where they say, okay, like this is all available on Game Pass, but if you would like all of the battle passes, like sort of a season pass type of thing, an annual pass or annual subscription specific to Call of Duty that is like, okay, you're gonna get the accelerated fucking black cell version of every one of the battle passes. You will also get like, here's a skin drop every 60 days or whatever it is. Some kind of Call of Duty specific subscription that they offer, kind of separated out from that. I wonder. I feel like they could do that and probably get away with it, specifically as a, because they don't give away DLC, they don't give away skins and shit with Game Pass. Occasionally you get a Game Pass perk that's like, hey, here's a skin, or here's your monthly drop of PSO2 currency. That's what I use Xbox Game Pass perks for. I click the button every month to get my PSO2 thing, and then I never launch the game to actually collect any of it. But I could see them. I could see them attempting to launch a separate Call of Duty subscription on top of Game Pass, where Game Pass gets you, basically the $60 or $70 version of the game. Like here, and that's it. If you want to buy the battle passes, you can buy them. If you want to buy skins, you can buy that stuff, or sign up for fucking Call of Duty Pro, Call of Duty XP, whatever. Bring back the branding for that stuff, and then say, with this, you'll get all of the battle passes plus 20 tier skips, and you'll get exclusive skins once a season, twice a season, whatever it is. Call of Duty Elite, right? Yes, it was Call of Duty Elite. Relaunch that. For the people who want that. Like, I don't, I think that that's stuff that they already sell, that they will certainly continue selling. And I could see them trying to say like, hey, do you want all of this stuff at a slight discount? It'll be cheaper for you if you sign up for Call of Duty Elite. Literally just call it Call of Duty Elite and put the Young Bucks in it. In their fucking Reeboks. Oh, I would sign up for that. Call of Duty Elite was always a really weird offering. Like, they were like offering more analytics. It was like, hey, do you want more metrics about your matches? You can sign up for Call of Duty Elite. And I'm like, I don't want that, but thanks. Hot heat maps. But yeah, I wonder, like I could see that being a route that they go down, where they say like, hey, we're gonna offer this stuff as a full on bundle. If you're subscribed to Game Pass, then you can also subscribe to this tier of Call of Duty service as an extra little thing. But we'll see what they end up doing. I mean, that stuff's a couple weeks away here. I will be here to live stream the Xbox showcase. We'll talk about that live. It's hard because then I have to like rush out of here afterwards to go see other games. I have appointments later in the day that Sunday to see stuff. So it's like I'll be here and then I'm getting out of here. And then I think Ubisoft is Monday, right? So I'm currently planning to talk over the Xbox and the Ubisoft things. We'll see if anything else materializes, but that's looking at what's there now. That's probably the stuff I will bring to you. Strauss Zelnick has gone on the record as saying that they are highly confident that GTA 6 will launch in the fall of 2025. They recently narrowed their launch window to the fall, as opposed to a generic 2025 date. The quote here, I guess he was on MSNBC. This is picked up by IGN Eurogamer. Ooh. Sorry. Every one of us will make sure we have as few bugs in a title as possible before we launch, but in the case of GTA 6, or in Zelnick's words, an extraordinary title for which there are extraordinary expectations, it is less about bugs and more about creating an experience that no one has seen before. And so the quote here from Zelnick is, Rockstar Games seeks perfection in what they do. Perfection is indeed hard to measure. It really is more subjective than objective. Yeah. And he says that we narrowed the timing because we are highly confident in that timing. That's it. but that they don't think there'll be any further delays. And that the game will be out next fall. This Video Games Chronicle has this story, and they have a relationship with all of those ReadPop sites, but I think it's like an ad deal that doesn't necessarily, like, they're independently owned. It's not they're not part of IGN now. Anyway, Masahiro Sakurai. Say what you will about the Smash Brothers franchise, but Sakurai is a fucking baller. You want to know why? Why this week? Why is he this week? Here's the headline. Masahiro Sakurai refused to add Dolby Surround to a Kirby game because players had to sit through the logo. Fucking A. Hell fucking yeah. This was a live stream from your friends at the Hamster Corporation, who are celebrating the 10th anniversary of their Arcade Archive series. I guess they're going to roll out Arcade Archives 2 for current consoles and sell you all those Neo Geo games a second time. Good on them, I guess. You'll get a discount if you own them already. But anyway, here's the quote here. This is a translated quote. When you're at the arcade, you swiftly jump from one machine to another, switching between various games. But why is it that you don't get the same impulse with Arcade Archive games, despite there being many games to choose from? Like, he's kind of taking them to task, because honestly, those Hamster games, they start up and there's a logo and there's another logo, there's a menu. There's, like, before you get to, the fucking 16K arcade ROM, there's a lot of rigmarole to get there. And he just says, I want you to measure the total time this takes and shorten it by even 1 second. It's fucking great. And I guess he, then he launched into this anecdote about Kirby Air Ride, which was originally supposed to have Dolby Surround. And he said, no, because Dolby forces you to put that logo up front. You would think that Dolby would be like understanding. Like, that's always the thing that really shocks me, is that there aren't more publishers, or aren't more, like, whether it's Speed Tree or Dolby or the NBA or whatever it is, that these companies aren't more understanding about the idea of just like, no, like, we want to get people into the game as fast as fucking possible. So instead they have all their contract terms about, like, it will be displayed, it will not have any other logos on the screen without approval. Without our approval, and it will be displayed on the screen for no fewer than 4 seconds or whatever it is. I would think that Dolby at some point would be like, yeah, no, we don't want to be the scapegoat for this either. And I guess people haven't really taken them to task over it all that often, so it's not that big of a deal. People have gotten pretty used to it. But he says here, I feel very sorry for making the user wait. If you take 1 second from each user, that means you'll be taking 10,000 seconds from 10,000 people. The more this repeats over the years, the more time you will cause players to lose. He's not wrong. That's a little intense, but I just wanted to point that out and say, fucking A. Yes. Like, if there was a trend, well, whatever. It's a long list of trends in gaming right now that we probably need to move away from. Layoffs, M&A, a lot of fucking nasty shit happening out there. But on the slightly more whimsical but still somewhat serious version of this list, yeah, fix that stuff. That stuff sucks. Give me my seconds back. Dolby. Those jerks at Dolby are trying to rob me of my life. And for what? Shoddy surround sound? No, thank you. Interesting little tidbit here. This comes from Steven Totillo, who was breaking down some of the Sony earnings numbers. He has a quote here from Hiroki Totoki. Cumulative PS5 sales are 59 million units or plus. Compared to monthly active users, still about half the people are playing on PlayStation 4. So console generation overlap will be handled well, and monthly active users will steadily increase. So the takeaway there is like half of Sony's monthly players, half of their players are still playing on PlayStation 4. Like we've had Sony go on the record and say like, PS5's kind of winded down. It's in the back half of its lifespan. And yet they haven't converted all of those players over, or more players over, to PlayStation 5. And I don't mean that in a like, oh, the dismal failure of the PS, like nothing like that. It's more like players are being satisfied by the way the PlayStation 4 runs. And because it'll play Fortnite, it'll play a lot of the big free-to-play games that, that they would want to play on a console. That stuff still works just fine there. Or rather, it works fine for a lot of people who are maybe a little less discerning than perhaps you or I might be. And I think, you could look at it and go like, well, yeah, they never cut the price on the PS5. Usually we're used to this cycle of like, they launch at a high price, they cut it. It's not just a holiday sale. They cut it down permanently. They launch a new model. They do this. There's movement with consoles. Things happen. A new model comes out, and so the other one, the price gets cut. The price gets cut around a holiday, and it stays cut because they want to. They've sold all the consoles they're going to sell for $500, and so they need to cut price to reach another tier of audience. And that's typically how it's run. Even in an era where they don't sell the console at a loss per se, or really don't want to sell it at a loss, like we've still seen some sorts of cuts on price or meaningful improvements in the offering. Now, we'll probably see something like this from Sony a little later this year when they start talking about a PS5 Pro. And we'll see how much that costs. Like, I think the winning move there would be to say the PS5 Pro is out and it's also $500, and now we're cutting the base model PS5 down to $350, whatever, $4, and chop 100 off both versions, whatever. That maybe that would be a way to go. I'm sure Sony would tell you, fuck that. How about instead we charge $650 for a PS5 Pro? And we just keep the PS5 at $500 because that thing was expensive to make, and we've sold a lot of them, but it was expensive to make. We'll see what happens when that happens, but this just kind of gets into one of the email questions this week was about, and we'll get into that in a bit here, but it was about this idea of like the PC being not for everyone because it's expensive. It's, it's more powerful, and not all players need that level of power, was kind of my thoughts on that. And I think that this is a really good example of that. I think you have a lot of players that, are largely satisfied with their relatively casual gaming experiences with a PlayStation 4. And they don't need to upgrade. They don't need a PC. They play games, but not enough to warrant them going out and spending hundreds of dollars on a new platform, or going out there and migrating over to a PC and then going like, well, now what parts do I need to get? I don't know anything about this. And what does that mean for the future of console gaming? Especially when you take into account some of the moves on ARM lately. Beltway Blue in the chat says NCAA football will bring a bunch of those over in North America. Maybe, but wouldn't the smarter move on EA's part be to put NCAA football out on PlayStation 4? I don't think they are doing that, right? Have they announced platforms for... Yeah, I guess it is just current platforms. Yeah, so yeah, perhaps that will be the thing that gets people to upgrade. We'll see. Microsoft announced a bunch of new laptops yesterday, and they're moving in a direction. They're calling these things, these new Surface laptops, they're calling them Copilot Plus PCs. They're going to come with a NPU in there, a neural processing unit, in order to perform AI-like tasks. Some of these seem like they might have genuine use. Like they showed some cases of like, oh, you can do color correction in DaVinci Resolve in seconds because of this NPU. Because it doesn't have to hit the GPU. We're getting better battery life out of these things. Like there are different little aspects of that I looked at and said like, well, okay, if this is what they're going to get out of it in terms of real genuine use cases, and it's not just fuck around chat bots and like, look at this, it's John Cena with 9 dicks, like all the image generation garbage and just all the goofy dumb shit that everyone talks about with AI. Like if they're actually going to, put some meaningful fucking improvements into, like improving people's lives by making this shit not take time, I guess, back to what Sakurai said, give people these seconds back on video rendering. And I was like, well, okay, I could see maybe this being interesting or this like making a lot of sense. In terms of like, hey, this is a new way for us to speed up processing of certain types because we can offload it off to this sort of stuff, have it all run locally on your machine, not have to spin up the GPU, spin up the fans, murder your battery. Like, hey, we can have some more powerful laptops. It was like parts of the case they made around that sort of stuff were like, I would say minorly compelling. I was like, okay, if you can show me like about 40 more use cases like this where it will actually make processor intensive things faster and make the things that bog down a laptop or bog down any computer less of a thing. Like, okay, yeah, show me stuff like that. Like genuine real use cases that people are getting work done faster because they're like, okay, I need to tweak this, and it just does it differently than it did before, but it's still doing the same work. I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe. But then they spent a bunch of time on, it really seems like a fundamental shift on how they want people to use a computer, and I guess I get it in a sense, but they have what they're calling recall, which is built into these machines. It's the basic idea is like, it's going to know what you were working on and when you were working on it. And the demo they showed, I think, was something along the lines of like, you opened up your, it opened up a PowerPoint you were working on and went right to the slide you were touching. And that it was a very easy process for that. And that's not, so it achieves this by taking what sound like literal snapshots of your fucking desktop. Like it's going to take pictures of what you're working on at all times so that it has that, so that it knows when you were doing that and what it was doing. And like, I can't fathom a world where I allowed anything to do that for security reasons. The Verge covered this event. They have a little bit here where they pulled some stuff from Microsoft's FAQ on recall. It just says, what will Microsoft's recall remember? And they have 5 little bullet points here that are quotes from the document. You can select specific apps or websites visited in a supported browser to filter out of your snapshots. Recall also does not take snapshots of certain kinds of content, including in private web browsing sessions in Microsoft Edge. Recall will not store DRM content. Note that Recall does not perform content moderation. It will not hide information such as passwords or financial account numbers. And so, okay, here's a fucking AI thing taking screenshots of my desktop that might have my fucking bank account on it. And from the sounds of things, they spent very little time going over the security or the privacy of those images of that LLM? Are the, let's say, are the cops going to be able to, like, or like anyone, is someone looking to hack and steal your stuff? Are they going to be able to either get onto your machine and copy the files off and get access to them? How secure will those images be? How private will that stuff really be? Can they fucking break into my house, yank my hard drive, and attack it that way? And they're like, oh, well, BitLocker encryption, like whatever fucking, like, yeah, okay, that's not going to last forever. And so why would I ever allow that? Let's say, for example, I was doing something on my computer that might not be legal. Why would I want fucking visual documentation of that sitting in a fucking file somewhere that a fucking AI can fucking repeat back to me? Is someone gonna, like, do the cops take a computer and then ask the AI, like, so what's this fucking guy into? And they're like, oh, he's really sick shit. Check this out. And then are you going to fucking jail? Like, what? Why would anyone willingly fucking sign up for this? Like, why would no records, no fucking records, Artie, no fucking records. Don't fucking keep records of what the fuck I do. I don't even want records of what the fuck I'm doing on my computer. I don't want them for me. And I'm not even doing fucking shady shit. I'm fucking editing videos about video games, but but occasionally I'm logging into a fucking bank account. And I do not want fucking, it's hard to trust. Like, Microsoft has not had the best internal security lately with some of their stuff. And I do not trust them the way that I maybe used to. Microsoft was maybe on a shorter list of companies that I go like, yeah, I have a little bit more trust with Microsoft than I do with Google, but not much. It's like 5% more of like, yeah, okay. But this just seems like the worst idea in the world. Yeah, yes. What if I'm working on something that's NDA'd and it's taking screenshots of it and storing it somewhere? And, even if it's stored locally, what if someone gets access to that? What if someone, there are a lot of bad scenarios with this. Like, what about, anyone working, this is something that, the company I used to work for had a large footprint in like healthcare shit, and we never touched any of the healthcare stuff, but because they dealt in people's health data, a lot of employees had to take a lot of very fucking intense security training around HIPAA and like the legal ramifications for when you should store data and where you should, if you have to handle a user's data, here's how to do so carefully. Like, I imagine if you're in that business, you just have to say no to all of this shit and block it all, right? Or that's a full-on HIPAA violation. Nothing about any of the AI stuff that's happened lately has felt secure or responsible in any way, shape, or form. And Microsoft is funding a company that is acting in an incredibly irresponsible way. You've maybe seen the news with Scarlett Johansson potentially filing a suit against OpenAI. Like, Microsoft is heavily invested in that company. Like, Microsoft's future is getting increasingly tethered to this fucking bullshit factory. Fucking Sam Altman's fucking smoke and mirrors fucking nightmare. I think that's fucking crazy. Again, if we remove all of the concerns and you think about it in terms of like, we now have a lot of people who don't know how a computer works and never will. And people have always been, I've worked in large companies and everyone, like, you have people that are just on the road doing remote sales and whatever else. And like, there are plenty of people who work in sales who know how a computer works. But you would just have people that would come in and like, I don't know, like, it's broken. You're like, no, all the IT horror stories from people at the company that are just like, have the dumbest problems that are like very easy to solve if you had half a brain. is clear proof that there's just there are a lot of people that don't want to will never truly learn how to use a computer, will truly never learn how to use it securely. People that are never going to install a password manager because they're just like, well, whatever, until it happens to them, and then maybe. But there's just a lot of people out there, and the rise of smartphones and tablets and everything else has accelerated this to a degree where, you're going to have generations of people that are just never going to learn how to use anything ever. And so I understand the push to try to make computers easy to use, because they're not. I think they are, but also I have spent my entire life using and learning how to use and improving my knowledge about how to use a computer. People shouldn't have to do that. And they don't have to do that. But I think there's a lot of people out there. And I think that, Windows is worse about it than Mac OS is. And so, you start to see these things fall into place and you go like, yeah, I see why, if they want to sell to, creative types or, individuals that, don't really get into the nuance of how a computer does its thing, why having an AI that's just going to remember what you were working on, so you can just go like, open up that document. We were working on something. Where'd that go? Is it an email attachment? Is it a thing on my desk? I don't know where anything is. What's a folder? It's very easy to see a world where, whatever. It's easy to see the value of making computers that are easier to use because there are a lot of people like that out there. And I think that we're breeding more of them all the time. Because, who's bothering to really learn how to use a PC? Who needs to know? Not that many people truly need to know. That's sad in a weird way, but I don't know. So yeah, I see why this might be a good push for them and why this might make sense. And also the other weird benefits of having access to a ton of data and whatever, that doesn't seem like a great move for computing. That said, they also showed a Minecraft demo, where I guess a version of GPT-4 was basically helping someone play Minecraft. With, like voice commands or just like levels of assistance about like, hey, here's the recipe for how to build this. Here's what you need to do to build this thing, and I don't think they've put video up of this presentation yet. They said they were going to, but I'm not sure if that has surfaced yet. This was not streamed live for whatever reason. Like, hey, we're announcing this super high-tech thing and we're not going to stream it live. It just seems like Microsoft. I don't know. Like they opened up pre-orders for them and these laptops and everything, and they didn't stream it live. If you go to Microsoft.com, it was just like the same old page. Like, say what you will about Apple, but like when Apple like announces new products, they take the fucking site down and put it back up and say, here's the fucking new thing. Microsoft, you go to their homepage, it's like, which version of Office 365 is right for you? And I'm like, it's still none of them, motherfucker. Thanks. So that's weird too. But when we start thinking about potentials for gaming applications for this sort of stuff, and the idea being of like, what if there was a trained thing that was watching you play games and could suggest assistance, or was watching you play and could, when asked, could help you out. It's not the worst idea in the world. It's the thing that will finish off the guide business once and for all. Like, PlayStation just did their update on their like hint system to allow community submitted hints, which to me sounds like an admission of failure. Like, oh yeah, this thing, we thought that maybe publishers and developers would generate this content for us, and they're like, fucking no. And so now we're going to open it up to the community to do it. but it kind of seems like the end game there is, or a potential end game for this is if you've got this kind of AI type thing over your shoulder, which sounds haunting in a weird way, but you know, the privacy ramifications of you playing a video game are a lot different than you opening up your bank account in a web browser. So, you know, the attack surface is pretty different in the context of, let's say this was the next Xbox. Let's say the next Xbox had this sort of AI thing built in, and it's not there necessarily to, you know, like, yeah, maybe there's some AI things about like, oh, we did some NPCs with this language model and we did this and we did that. But like, what if there's a whole hint system built onto it? What if you didn't have to fucking hunt for fucking YouTube videos and skip past like 8 minutes of bullshit just to find the 3-second solution you were looking for? What if you, this is something I have thought about for years in different forms, you know, because this technology was not really a thing. Trying to help people who are stuck in games, because we have a lot of people out there that don't finish games, right? There are tons of people out there that never finish games and they get stuck in games and they bounce off them and whatever. So if we're trying to grow, we, meaning we are the theoretical Microsoft trying to figure out this solution here, let's say. If our stated goal is to continue to grow the gaming industry, you need to find ways to allow players of wildly different skill levels and levels of experience and everything to enjoy video games. And now for those of you who are generally within the sound of my voice, you're going to think that this probably sounds pretty repulsive because you play video games and, you know, you listen to a video game podcast. You're pretty far down this rabbit hole already. But, you know, what if you got stuck in something and you could ask like, or you got lost and you're like, hey, where am I supposed to go? And it could just fucking tell you. That's powerful. The solution, I've talked about it before. It is the most backwards ass solution. But like, I was trying to figure out a way to like integrate game facts content into games themselves, and trying to think about the technology that existed at the time and everything else. And so I always thought of it, or the solution I came to, which I pitched to someone internally who said I was insane. And then I said, yeah, you're right. But like, also, wouldn't that be cool? The idea I had was around smart speakers like Alexa or whatever else. And so it was a situation where you could ask your smart speaker, like, what do I do next? But it would need to know where you were in the game. And so the idea was, okay, well, what if there was a hint button you could hit in the game that would make it emit a series of sounds that the speaker would hear, and it would tell the speaker exactly where in the game you were. Now, with all the consoles being internet connected, there's probably a smoother way to do this, but the idea was like, okay, what's the lowest touch way to integrate this stuff possible? And basically have like an audio, you know, and there's been TV commercials and stuff that have used that type of technology before. And the basic idea being like, you know, that it would say like, okay, we heard this thing and we know you're in chapter 5. We know you don't have this fucking rock and that you're looking at this quest. And so, you know, we think you should go left, or, you know, whatever it is, and get as nuanced as you possibly can get. So I think, you know, the problem with training language models and all this stuff, I think we've seen in too many examples that it just fucking lies, that it's wrong all the time, that it just makes up the worst fucking shit. And Google is increasingly stuffed with fucking garbage because these things can't be trusted. So there's a lot of hurdles there that you would have to get over, that you would hope, if we're taking... You know, if we're taking this whole, you know, we're not trying to train a language model to understand the entire world. We're using it to understand this specific linear video game. And so you could ask, hey, I'm here and I don't know what to do next. What should I do? In theory, that should be at least slightly easier than trying to make a full-fledged smart chatbot that can talk to you about anything at any time. But I don't know. Like, there's some version of that is probably useful to a certain type of player. But how do they train it out of the gate? Is that stuff available at launch, or does it have to sit there and watch you play through a game for hundreds of hours before it's smart enough to recommend hints to other players? You know, like what is it like? Are other players then training an AI when they play a game? Like, that's probably not great. It's a lot of bad situations. It's a lot of messy answers. There's no like clean, like, oh, look at this. Like, the only way for it to be clean is if you just stop caring about the parts that make it funky and the parts where this stuff never has worked nearly as well as anyone has ever said it would. And so, you know, how are they going to actually limit these things so that they're correct? Are they going to pre-program all of it? Because that's not AI at that point. That's, you're just making an interactive voice thing that can answer questions about a specific topic. That tech already exists. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of potential for that to go completely wrong. But I wonder if that's going to be a direction that they're going to try to go in with Xbox. If that's going to be one of the potential uses that they will try to leverage some of this AI stuff. Because remember, you know, Microsoft is investing a fuckload of money into all of this AI garbage. They've got to get something out of it. And so every group is going to be incentivized to integrate that stuff, because then they'll be good. You're a good corporate citizen. You're aligned with our values. Like, all of that shit. Yeah, I don't know. That's one of those things that if it worked, you'd be like, that's cool. That's useful. You know, some players get stuck more than others, and not having to stop the game and go and look at something else and try to, you know, like, you spend half your time looking to try to line up where you are in the game with the thing you're looking for, which takes a lot of work. Like, if that process could be damn near automated and they could just give you the solution or just give you some hints or something that you could use to go forward, I think that would be cool. Obviously, all of that is easier said than done. But I would not be shocked if to see them go in this direction. These are also ARM units. All these laptops they just announced. They will continue. Like, Intel is going to keep doing chips. AMD is going to keep doing chips. But the stuff they showed yesterday were all like Snapdragons. They were all Qualcomm chips. There's a job listing for Sony in Japan for like a systems engineer. That doesn't come right out and say, hey, you need to know ARM. But it's in Japanese. Like, people are translating it, but it does seem to indicate, like, hey, it would be really nice if you knew a lot about different chipsets. And some people are taking this as a sign that perhaps the PlayStation 6 could, you know, be switching architectures, that they could go ARM. The efficiency of ARM is, you know, like looking at the performance on these Apple laptops that they've got out, and some of the stuff they're doing with, you know, the M3s and I guess the M4 now. And looking at that as kind of a similar sort of thing. And then looking at these, like that with, you know, like I was like, oh, I want to get a new MacBook. I want to play around with an M3 or an M4 at some point here and see what the hell it's all about. And then when they started talking about these new Windows laptops, and they're like, we think ARM is finally ready for it, because it's not the first time they've had Windows running on ARM, but it's fucking sucked. So it seems like something that's like maybe a little bit more ready for prime time now. But then when they started talking about all of the Copilot AI, everything on top of it, it was just like, okay, I just don't know if I can trust this. I don't know. I don't know that I trust that machine to keep me safe and secure. You know, the types of data that I would use on a laptop. I don't know that I trust it. And you know, Apple's gonna integrate a bunch of fucking AI garbage into iOS 18, and you know, like they'll be off to the races with their trash soon enough, and we'll all race to the bottom. Yeah, but yeah, the idea of a laptop that is constantly taking screenshots of what you're working on, regardless of how personal or impersonal it may be, just doesn't seem smart. And the idea that they haven't been out there, like I didn't, if they were, I didn't see it in this context, but like you would think this would come with a, hey, these are also our most secure laptops ever. They'll talk about like on-device processing and, oh, we don't send this stuff to the cloud. We don't use it to train a model. So your personal data is not going to be used to train a model. And, you know, they can get out there and say that stuff. Whether you believe it or not is kind of on you. I don't think they would say that stuff if they weren't necessarily, you know, going to do that. But at the same time, even processing it and storing it locally doesn't seem safe for me. That doesn't seem smart at all. And so the lack of talk about, you know, how secure or insecure this stuff may be, to me, you just like, that kind of shoots all of it in the foot, and you're just like, how can I trust this shit? Why would I trust this shit? The idea that like they're okay taking fucking screenshots of your bank account numbers, but they're like, DRM protected content, we won't take any screenshots of that. Like, fuck you. Truly revealing in terms of where their priorities are on that stuff. There will be one more update for Redfall. The update that was being worked on in conjunction or just prior to the studio's closure will roll out. The Redfall account has said as much, that this will revamp the neighborhood and nest systems. It will add the ability to pause in single player. It will add an offline mode and more. Offline mode is cool. I mean, you know, with the game being largely kind of online and co-op focused and everything, you know, a game that's not going to get any further support. I think the idea of adding an offline mode at the end here, that's kind of cool. And last bit of news comes to us from Raw Thrills and its subsidiary Play Mechanics. Raw Thrills is they're a Illinois-based studio. Eugene Jarvis founded it, creator of Defender and Robotron. The most recent Cruisin' game that came out on Switch is from Raw Thrills. If you see a big, crazy looking arcade cabinet somewhere, chances are Raw Thrills made it. They made like Slither.io into an arcade cabinet of all things. They did the like American Idol games, I want to say. They have done it. They're one of the few companies out there still making arcade games. They have announced a new arcade game. It is called NBA Superstars. It's a 3-on-3 basketball game. And there's a lot of ex-Midway people, at least in the early days. I don't know how many of them are still at Raw Thrills, but you know, Raw Thrills definitely had a handful of ex-Midway folks there. Play Mechanics, the studio that I guess is a subsidiary, was also founded by an ex-Midway person. Not necessarily people that I think were on the team for the original NBA Jam, but they put out a trailer for this thing, and you look at it, you're like, oh, you're making a new NBA Jam. Like Tim Kitzrow is doing the commentary for it. Like it is that side view basketball game. It's 3-on-3, more like NBA Showtime than an NBA Jam was, but with 4 human players. So it looks like you'll always have one AI person on your team, no matter what. And it looks good. It's going to have a 75-inch screen on it, which is insane. The trailer they put out talks a little bit about the cabinet itself, and they're like, it's got LED lighting that matches the team that you selected, and it's got this banner thing, and they don't show as much of the game as you would like. It looks like there's an on fire style mechanic called superstar mode, and it looks really nice. It looks really nice. It's out this summer. It will have 120 NBA players and all 30 teams. So yeah. LeBron James, maybe you've heard of him. Steph Curry. So yeah, go check out that trailer if you want to see something. It's just I don't know. Like I will find a Dave and Buster's and try this out one of these days when this thing finally comes out. I'm curious to see how it goes. It's always nice to hear that Tim Kitzrow is, doing a voice for a basketball game. Heartwarming news. And that's going to do it for the news. Why don't we move on to some emails here? podcast@guard.bike is the email address for you if you want to reach out to me, for me to answer questions from you. Such as JP from Maryland. It says, given all the recent turmoil at Microsoft, I'm curious what you think about the future of Double Fine. Tim Schafer sounded excited to be joining Microsoft since it meant he no longer had to constantly scramble for enough funding to keep the lights on while they were making their unique brand of games. He also said that Game Pass might be especially well suited to Double Fine since they tend to make games that look too weird for people to take a leap on, but if they can get started for free, they may find that they really like them. To me, though, that just makes Double Fine sound like a studio, from a market point of view, makes a lot of hi-fi rushes. Do you think Double Fine is in a different situation than the studios that were recently shut down? Or would you be nervous if you were in Tim Schafer's shoes? Well, I would be nervous if I was employed by any part of the internal studio structure as part of the Xbox Game Studios. I would be at least a little bit nervous. I would have been nervous before those shutdowns, but I would have been extra nervous now. But also, we don't really know what that studio is working on. I mean, so think about Ninja Theory and this report that they have 2 games in the works, and think about Microsoft does still need games. They can't shut down everything. It doesn't seem like, and Matt Booty got up in front of everyone at Xbox after this and said, we need games like Hi-Fi Rush. What that says to me is that they know that they need, and that's like not, of course they do. Their portfolio needs games big and small. They can't just focus on the hits because those games take forever to develop, are prone to delays, are, for them has been very hit and miss lately. They're big games. And so they need a tier of smaller releases. And Game Pass was supposed to be a safety net for those types of games. And so on paper, you look at it and think like, well, hey, yeah, these are probably the cuts they made. Maybe they've got one more round in them. You think about it like maybe these are the Bethesda cuts, and maybe we'll see some Activision cuts at some point down the line. Just to kind of sweep through their acquisitions and all of that. They also opened Activision opened a new studio that they're calling a AAA studio working on new IP. So in the midst of all of this stuff, there's a new studio forming as well. So at the end of the day, Microsoft is still in the game business. At the end of the day, Microsoft still makes too much money on its subscription services to walk away from them. And so they still need a healthy mix of games, both big and small. And they can't guarantee that they're going to get all of that from third parties. So they're going to have to make some of those games themselves. And so I think that there is certainly a path for that type of smaller game to continue to exist in the context of the Xbox studio structure. And I think that Double Fine has been, really good at making critical darlings that haven't always sold, and that Game Pass is supposed to be the thing that helps them. And like literally that was the pitch out of all this stuff. And so I think if they were to go and shut down Double Fine, I would take that more as a sign that the studio just didn't have anything lined up, or that their game that they were working on wasn't coming together properly and, was going to cost way more money and time to make. And so at some point they cut their losses and go like, all right, we're not going to move forward with this. I would take some of these signs as more of reflective of what is likely to come out of that studio in the future. And you could argue that like those pitches and stuff have to be approved by Microsoft. And so if they change their mind about what types of games they need, that could still impact some of these studios in really negative ways. Games that Microsoft were maybe hot to green light 2 years ago, they might look at now and go, yeah, geez, maybe this is not the direction for us. That's a long-winded way of saying anything can happen, because that's where we're at with a lot of this stuff. Anything can happen. We don't really know. Do I think that they're going to go and shut a ton of Xbox studios at this point? No, I don't. Do I think that I think they have said as much, that there's, that there's still a little bit more on the chopping block. Do they straight up shutter studios as a part of this? I don't know. I'd have to look at, are there other mobile studios in the mix? Like how many studios does Bethesda still own? Because there were, there were names in that initial shutdown that, you hadn't necessarily heard in a good long time. You're like, oh, right, I guess that studio did get formed. They had the mobile team and this and that, or the studio that did the Doom thing. And, like, does Activision have a bunch of mobile studios in addition to King somewhere? Are there sections of King that are working on games that are just not coming together and they're going to get laid off? Like, it's entirely possible. King is a really interesting one. I think acquiring a mobile company is really fucking dicey. It's like, it's really like watching, when we look at like Zynga, who, I guess they're owned by 2K now, or, Sega and Angry Birds and or even just in the past, like before those big acquisitions, but like in the past when you have like, hey, we made a hot mobile game and then we got acquired by Zynga, or we got acquired by this other studio because they liked this game we made. And they're like, cool, what are you working on next? Like, we're going to make a sequel to that. And then they do, and no one fucking cares. Like, the mobile audience seems so fickle. Or they don't have a brand loyalty the same way that maybe console players do when it comes to sequels and whatever else. So like when you go and buy the studio that made Candy Crush, you're like, okay, cool. Like Candy Crush is probably peaked, right? I mean, I don't imagine that the Candy Crush business gets any bigger for that particular game. And so at some point, that means it can only go down. And so at some point, you're like, all right, we've got to fucking make another one. We've got to make another game. And I'm sure that they've experimented. I'm sure they probably by now have shipped multiple Candy Crush games, right? But you only really hear about the one. I'm guessing, just for how long they've existed. When I think about the Angry Birds path of like, Angry Birds Star Wars. Here's another Angry. You didn't like? No, that one. No. Okay, Angry Birds 2. I don't know. Someone in the chat here says Candy Crush has a few different SKUs and they're growing. Okay, so maybe they haven't topped out yet, and in which case that's probably smart. And there was like the Candy Crush fucking game show or something too, right? But at some point those existing games peak and they have to make another one. And so how long can they spend making Candy Crush adjacent games and have them do as well as they need to be doing before the bottom kind of drops out on it and they're like, oh man, we made Candy Crush 2 and no one came. So yeah, that's always a weird one for me when it comes to like buying a mobile studio. What are you really buying? You're buying like those monthly active users, you're buying whatever their daily revenue is, and you hope that they can keep that machine going, and you hope that they can pivot that expertise into something that does even better next time. But the even better next time thing feels like the part that never seems to quite work out that way. I don't know. I'm sure there have been some companies that have bucked that trend. And, you know, Microsoft's footprint in mobile is so small that even if they got Candy Crush and it was kind of on the other side of its, you know, path and was on its way down, that would still be way bigger than anything that they had, and it would be for a long time. So yeah. It's been a lot of stuff like this. You know, we talked a little bit about this last week, and, you know, like I think there are players out there that are like shook about video games and what's happening in video games. And I get it. I am also a little shook. But in a different way than a lot of these emails are. Mason in Virginia writes in and says, I play video games for the mixture of story and gameplay. I really enjoyed a well-told game story, but as the industry moves on to free-to-play multiplayer games that are not interested in telling a story, I feel like the reason I play games is dwindling. I just want to ask, am I a dying breed when it comes to playing video games? I think there are a lot of smaller games with story. I think that there are plenty of games, like there are indie games all over the place that are incredibly story focused. And so if you're open to those sorts of games, I think you'll find that there are games out there that do still have a very solid mixture of gameplay and story. You just have to dig a little bit deeper for it, because if you're used to being served up a series of, you know, high-end first party story driven single player games, because that's what the console industry used to do a lot of, it's easy to, like, that comfort zone I think is dwindling a little bit, you know. That's the sort of stuff that Sony has largely specialized in, you know. But I don't think that I don't think there are as many studios making that style of game at that scale and scope, because no one can afford to make games of that size and scale and scope anymore. Even Sony is probably taking a long look at some P&Ls and going like, fuck, dude, we sell some skins on the back end? Like any, you know, this is a lot of goddamn money. But I think there are plenty of games that have, you know, you could be playing, Life Eater, you know, you could be enjoying Tunic, which has a story, you know, Hellblade at least has a story, you know, Hades 2 has a story, and fun writing and fun characters and all of that good shit. There are a ton of games out there that have stories in them. So from that perspective, I totally disagree. But if you're solely looking at it from the perspective of, man, back in the PS2 days, it felt like there were a trillion story-driven games coming out, and they all were at this kind of basic level of budget and level of polish and whatever else, I agree with you. That doesn't exist the same way it used to. I think to continue to play games in this era, if you played a lot of games back then, I think that there's a lot of, you know, you probably need to do more work. Because like I was saying last week, discovery and finding these games in the first place. I forgot that the Braid Anniversary Edition came out until last night. It came out on the 14th. It came out a week ago. You know, games that like I was anticipating still manage to fly under the radar when they release from time to time, you know. You know, when I mentioned that Hellblade was out today, a bunch of people in chat were like, wait, it's out? Like sometimes the information just doesn't get where it needs to go on some of these games, and you know, there's some weird disconnect in the news cycle, or, you know, like there's the press, the press is not what it used to be. The press can't spend as much time on as many different games. There are more games coming out and less people to cover them. Yeah, X Defiant came out this morning, supposedly. I preloaded it last night. It said it was going to launch at 10 a.m. So it started it launched the same time as this podcast. Supposedly. And there's a lot of, there's just a bunch of stuff like that, and so I think, you're going to need to do the work because there's no one left to do it for you. Ultimately, there are not as many publications out there, covering games, and there are way more games. And so it's impossible for what is out here, trying to cover games in a responsible way and trying to approach things in an editorial fashion, and on all of that. Like, there's just not as much of that out there. People are doing, their newsletters and different sites and stuff, but even, if you're checking out all these different sites, like, they're not covering the breadth of games that you need to truly feel like fully informed. I don't think there's a way to be fully informed about video games anymore. There's too many. And that problem of not enough people left to cover games in a professional fashion, combined with even more games coming out all the time, I think it's really hard. And it was kind of, what I was talking about a little bit last week around, like, sometimes you do spend time covering indie games and no one shows up to watch, like that Mini Shoot Adventures video I did was one of the worst performing videos I've run all year. But like, and again, I don't really care about that. I care about that insofar as I think more people should play Mini Shoot Adventures, because it's awesome. Not so much as to like, Mom, my YouTube, whatever, right? But like, classically, and this was something when we were doing Quick Looks, which was a series of videos that went up on the internet looking at games. The question of what is the right number of those to do in a week was never answered satisfactorily. As many different data people as I tried to get in front of and say, I need this fucking question answered. Like, what's the line? Because editorially, I know the line. There are games that are big that you want to cover because people will want to know, and that it's a big game, so people will show up for it. And there are the smaller games that you believe in, where you go like, we need to do this. People need to know about this. And so at times, as we had different managers and different people with different takes on it, it was like, okay, we need to do way fewer of these so that they are more impactful. And you're like, well, wait, don't we want something up on the site every day? It's like, maybe not. Maybe actually not. In order for these smaller ones to have the impact that they could have, maybe it needs to be, and so it was this weird situation where, and there are different users out there with different viewing patterns, right? Where some of them just want more quick looks regardless of the game because they just want something to watch. But then you've also got the people who are just like, well, I'm not going to watch this because it's for some fucking indie game that I don't care about and whatever else. And so you would see the traffic on those do way worse, and you would have bean counters at some point up the chain and go like, well, that one wasn't worth doing. And you'd have to say, actually it was, because from an editorial perspective, we believe in this game. That's why we chose to do it. And there would be some grumbling about like, well, who gives a shit about that? And you have to be like, well, all right, yep, I guess. If that's the fight we're having, then who gives a shit about that, huh? Who gives the shit about having an editorial team? Right? So yeah, it's like figuring out what games to cover and when, and how and everything, I think is really, it can be a hard question to answer for as easy as it seems like it should be to answer. I think a lot of that stuff ends up being weirder than it may seem. Just by virtue of like, okay, well, yeah, like sure, someone could spend 5 hours, getting up to speed on this game, or we could just walk in there and record it. It's not going to impact the views on this video. So for like, from a business perspective, it's probably better to just walk in there and record it, than it would be to like spend a bunch of time prepping for it. And sometimes I would just, different games got different levels of prep or whatever, just by virtue of when the game showed up, if it was embargoed, if it was this or that, there wasn't really always a rhyme or reason to that specific side of it. But yeah, there was definitely like at times there were definitely people who were like, you guys are doing too many of these. I was like, I don't know. Cal from Manchester writes in and says, there's been a lot of chat about Phil Spencer's image as a gamer first, executive second in the wake of the recent Microsoft shutdowns. Obviously, this image has been very intentionally built by Xbox over the last few years in order to make the business decisions they were making more palatable to a wider audience. But that leads me to think that it has the unintentional side effect of this betrayal, quote unquote, being even more hurtful to the gaming community at large. Do you think it was a good decision by Xbox to make Phil a friend to the masses? And how do you feel about your role in it, having had him on for interviews? I've always found those interviews incredibly interesting, but wondered how you felt about it now. I mean, I like interviewing people in those positions. It doesn't matter if they're like presenting themselves as a friend to the people or not. Like I want to interview all of the people in those sorts of positions for sure. But like, yes, I think that there were concerted efforts played at times to try to make the Xbox leadership seem more human and more palatable in a deliberate fashion. And I think they did a pretty decent job of that. That's something, I mean, if you go back to, you take that all the way back to the before and after Jay Allard photos, like when they got a hold of him and he's like, all right, get your ear pierced. Here's this hoodie. We're going to put this jacket over it. Get out there and wow him, baby. I think the betrayal, the thing they ran into, and it's separate from like, is that really Phil Spencer or not, or whatever, like that's like a separate conversation that like we're not necessarily equipped to have. Because at the end of the day, I don't really know Phil Spencer. We've had some conversations, very cordial. Last few times I've seen him, I'm like, hey man, it's good to see him. I feel that way about most people in video games. It's good to see him. And he's personable. Like that's, but also he, I think he answers questions in a more real way than a lot of executives do. And I think sometimes that does open them up to what they're finding now, or what they've kind of walked into now. And you could say like, oh yeah, hey, like it's also in the company's best interest for him to come off a certain way and whatever else. But I will say that I've heard behind the scenes that he has been very helpful to developers. And I've talked about this before, but like, that there have been situations with third parties where they needed a solution, and that he was willing to help get it solved, even if Microsoft's policies were not necessarily aligned with what those developers were trying to do. He has actual experience in the field. He's not just some guy who walked into it and said like, I don't know, man, I've been putting boxed cake mixes on shelves for the last 20 years. I'm sure I can sell these fucking video games. Like he's not that guy. So, he has some roots in it. as does Matt Booty. You know, Matt Booty is an unlockable character in NBA Jam. I mean, you know, he found himself the CEO of Midway at the end, which had a real fucking like left holding the bag kind of vibe for it or whatever. But you know, also he's the buck stops with him at the end of the day. You know, he's the head of gaming for all of Microsoft. And they've had a really rough run. And so, yeah, all that stuff turns on a dime. When things are going well, he's a friend to the gamer and he's this and that. And now, you know, we've seen all of these articles that are like, it's time for a leadership change. Like, you know, people calling for his head in a way that I get it. But at the end of the day, I don't know. And I don't know that I feel as well versed in their numbers and their sort of stuff there as I need to be to say like, oh, do they actually need new leadership, or is this being forced upon them from the CEO's office? Or, you know, what it's like, I think all of Microsoft is fucking up. I don't necessarily pin that on Phil Spencer. I mean, he is a leader in that position. And so at the end of the day, if gaming is not doing well, then he's the gaming guy, so it's got to be on him, right? But it's just never quite as simple as that, is my point. Anyway, I think what they walked into, I think the problem they actually ran into with a lot of this stuff is they spent a lot of time as part of being personable and accessible on Twitter. It's really the stuff they did on Twitter that I think really bit them. When it came time to do this multi-platform thing, is they enabled and they helped some of these like Xbox influencer type people get up on a pedestal, or at least feel like they were on some kind of pedestal. They helped put the Tim Dogs of the world on, and gave them credence and gave them some kind of voice. Where they maybe felt like they were being paid attention to, maybe a little bit more than they actually were. And so they, you know, in the interest of seeming personable and listening and all of this other stuff, they would try to do things for those segments of the community, for the Xbox super fans out there. And it's not like the wrong move to do per se. But again, when things are going well, it's real easy to do all that stuff. When things start fucking up and you start making pivots and you go, okay, we're going to start doing this, we're going to start doing that. And you reveal that like, hey, by the way, this is a business. And if the business calls for us to do things that don't align with your views as like Team Green, I love Xbox, we're still going to do that because this is a business. Then you're going to end up with a lot of angry weirdos. And so they found themselves suddenly surrounded by a bunch of angry weirdos. And that's on them for kind of, I think, giving those people a little bit too much of a platform, or at least like the little retweets here and there and some of that stuff that they kind of played into it. They were happy to enjoy it when things were going well, or going well better than they seemingly are now. But yeah, these guys online that considered themselves big Xbox fans, and that got them followers or whatever, and all they did is fight with PlayStation people all day. It's like a gross, especially, you know, for a company that talks about how much it doesn't like exclusives, and how much how much Spencer has been out there saying like, you know, for me to win, Sony doesn't have to lose for this, you know, like not pitching it as a big console war, to play into the people that are like the front lines of that dumb mindset, bit them in the ass. And it made that announcement of them pivoting to this kind of occasional multi-platform thing a lot harder for them to accomplish than it should have been, because they had cultivated these nuts out there. And so I think that's the thing that, you know, the kind of got them off track. And I think that's the thing that made things seem more negative than they really were. I don't think things are going great over there when we look at we look at the industry, and we look at what some publishers have said, quietly about Game Pass deals and some of the other stuff that's changed about the Xbox business, I don't think they're in a great, awesome position. It's not like the Xbox is not flying off the shelves. They're not in a great spot. I mean, that feels like can kind of go without saying, but anyway, I'm happy to interview people in those sorts of positions. That's just, they are the people in those positions, like regardless of their demeanor or whatever, or whether you think it's a put on or not, or how much of it is a put on or not, which, ultimately we'll never really know. How much of me is a put on right now, baby? You'll never know. But you know what I mean? You were always seeing the on-camera version of these people. I am only ever seeing the on-camera, in front of the press version of these people. So I don't, yeah. The number of stories I've heard over the years it's actually frustrating. Like it's a long list of people that became like darlings in the media, or not even with the media, but they appeared in some interviews, and then like the public latched onto them and they're like, this person's amazing. Wow, what an awesome guy. He really cares about us, the players, and I'm sure he's a great guy to work with, and what a nice dude, and just makes all the right decisions all the time. How could anyone not like this guy? He's got a tiny Blanca figure. How could you not like him? And you're like, oh, wait, really? Oh, huh. Like there's a lot of shit like that. Of just like people that are not the super nice people you see them doing in interviews all the time, that working with them is maybe a little different. And you hear some of those stories over the years of people just going like, ugh, this fucking guy. And that's always fascinating because of course it's like that, not like that in 100% of the cases, but like, you hear about Miyamoto flipping the table over because it's Mario time. That's not the Miyamoto you're getting in the interview in front of Super Nintendo World, where he's like talking about a Zelda movie or whatever. I'm not saying that he's a monster or anything like that. He might be, but these people are managers a lot of the time. Chase from Cleveland with another Xbox related question. On the last episode of the show, you talked about game sales on Xbox being significantly lower than other platforms. My Switch is my indie/Nintendo machine, and I buy pretty much everything else on PS5. I only use my Series S for Game Pass games and old backwards compatible games. My reason for this is I was able to buy a 2 terabyte NVMe for my PlayStation 5 years ago for under $200. Meanwhile, the expansion cards for Xbox are usually $120 to $150 for 1 terabyte. The 350 gigs of usable storage is incredibly limiting, especially if you keep a live service game like Halo or Call of Duty installed year-round. We know that the Series S is the best-selling model of Xbox currently available, so I wonder how many other people bought it then as a supplement to their other gaming machines and only use it for Game Pass. Yeah, and his question is like, does the expensive storage options limit their game sales? I don't think that people are necessarily not buying games on Xbox because they don't have room to store them. You're right that those external... So for people who don't know the situation on Xbox, if you want to expand storage for Xbox Series X and S games, you need to buy fast storage, and that's what those external little cards are, and they're expensive. Yeah, that 1 terabyte add-on. I have one of those 1 terabyte add-ons. If you want to store Xbox One or Xbox 360 games, you can plug in whatever drive you got. You got a fucking USB stick, or you got an external drive. So I have both. I have the little expansion card, the little proprietary thing jammed into the back of my Series X. And then I also have an external USB drive plugged in for older games. And so I don't mind, that stuff is expensive, or at least the proprietary Xbox storage upgrade was expensive. But it's got a lot of storage space on it now, and it's never full up because I deleted everything. I was like, I'm not playing any of these games. I should delete all of them. And so I did. I think it's a hassle that both consoles treat those storage spots like different storage. And you have to choose, like, do you want to install this game to the internal PS5 storage or the NVMe drive that you bolted in here? And you're like, I don't care. Just put it on there. But instead it's like, oh, well, there's only 40 gigs free on your internal drive and this needs 55, so you can delete stuff, or you could install it to the other drive. Like, fucking shut up and install it to the other drive. Like, I shouldn't have to think about this. There should be a setting where I'm just like, I don't care, install it. It should drive pool those two drives together and just say, like, here's one big disk. It's fucking 4 terabytes, 3 terabytes, whatever it is. Install your games on it and never think about it. And, for the slower storage, obviously that's a different story. It's the same deal on PS5. If you want to load PS4 games off of a USB drive, you can do so. And so I do that. I installed an NVMe drive into the PS5, and also I have an external USB drive on it for PS4 games. It's dumb. Or it's not dumb. It's great to have those options, but the management of that space is dumb. The work that I have to do to manage that storage space and move things around, and like that stuff should not be something that users ever have to think about. Let's see. Joe from Hawaii says, you still got that Stream Deck pedal? Hit the fucking gas, man. Let's hear it. I do have it. It's not hooked up. I keep thinking about hooking the pedal up, but I don't know what I would put on it. But hearing Joe from Hawaii say it, maybe I should just have it trigger a sound effect of an engine revving. Maybe that would be the right thing to put on those pedals, and I could just sit here and rev the engine. It's not an analog pedal though. I ordered a glider, which is like an analog foot pedal thing that they did on Kickstarter, and I think that's analog. So maybe I'll just and I have no idea what to do with it. I was like, this looks neat, and now I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll just have that play engine noises. Maybe that's the right answer. Times change. Here's a good example of it. Spencer from Austin writes in. After the CG trailer for the new Assassin's Creed hit, I ended up getting in a long argument with some idiots on Reddit about pre-ordering games. Well, there's your first mistake. It wasn't that long ago that I would regularly see the top comment on any botched release be something like, don't pre-order games, with 10,000 upvotes. But that sentiment seems to have swerved violently in the opposite direction. Me asking, why bother pre-ordering when digital distribution is a thing? And in the case of Ubisoft games, deep discounts are not uncommon within the first year of release, seriously ruffled some feathers, as I had numerous people telling me that no, pre-ordering is good, waiting for reviews and impressions is bad because of FOMO, and that actually being against pre-ordering is niche and dumb. This seems insane. Are these bots? Paid shills on behalf of Ubisoft? Or am I just too smart for the cesspool that is Reddit? What is going on? What could possibly be good about pre-ordering games in today's day and age? So the pre-ordering games is fucking terrible, but also there are some situations where they do that thing where you play the game 3 days early. Sometimes that's a value depending on what you've got going on. I like to play games at release, but my advice is still that you shouldn't pre-order games. unless you really know what you're getting into. And if you get burned by it, you have no one to blame but yourself. But yes, I definitely, yeah, I tend to agree that yes, people probably should not pre-order games. Yeah, pre-order it one day. If you're like desperate to get some pre-order bonus or something like that, then pre-order it before, like the day before it comes out or something. Get on one of the Activity Pub open source Reddit replacements. Maybe that's better. I signed up for one of those. The fuck's it called? I forget now. But when everyone was mad about Reddit, which Reddit, by the way, they signed another deal. Yeah, kbin.social. Reddit's going to go and fucking sell all of your posts to OpenAI so that they can train language models on it. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that great? Isn't that fucking sweet? No? Was that not? Oh, weird. Mike in Tennessee asks, do you think CBS ever had any intention of getting you guys back in the studio before selling the company to Red Ventures? Was there ever any talks about a studio with Red Ventures? Yeah, I think I've talked about this before, but so during the pandemic, Jason moved, and then I decided I was going to move down here. And it was just like, yeah, it became clear that like the San Francisco stuff was probably never going to be in a studio again, because the lease on that building was going to run out. There were a lot of different reasons, but one of the things when I was moving down here was we had discussion about the idea of building a new studio down here, and that I would hire a new team or whatever for some down here stuff. But that was, again, like super dependent on a lot of things about the pandemic, and when would that be a thing that you could do, and when would that, there was just a lot of things around that. And then the sale of the company happened, and there was still discussion about that stuff, but it was very tentative. It was never like, all right, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. It was like, all right, go. I think a lot of the verbiage was like, go have your kid, and then next year we'll figure it all out. So that was like September, and then January you're supposed to figure it all out. But the person I was having those conversations with got transferred out of that role, and someone else got transferred in, and it became very clear that nothing cool was ever going to happen again. At that point, so like, okay. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was certainly a thought. It's not necessarily a new thought. It is something that, like in terms of the style of studio that I wanted to open, and still would like to maybe open someday if it made sense. But that stuff's very expensive and all of that. So, yeah, I don't know. There was, I would never call it a plan. It was more like, maybe we do something like this, and we get this person, and see if this person would move down, or whatever it was. There were discussions, but they were very loose, and they went up in smoke. They went up in smoke literally the day my son was born. That was when there was like the management change happened, and suddenly things were different. Let's see here. Andrew writes in from Seattle. And this is the email I was alluding to earlier. With all the gloomy sentiment in the current console gaming discourse, I feel like there's a tendency in both dev and enthusiast circles to kind of hand wave a lot of stuff that doesn't really affect us over in the PC space. In a lot of ways, it makes sense that the only two console platform holders, assuming Nintendo was committed to staying handheld first for a while, are both in very weak positions right now. They're flashing red on the ropes, etc. Time for Sega to come back out of nowhere and strike while the iron's hot. No. He's joking. Anyway, there are games that totally make sense with a mouse and keyboard, but generally speaking, I just do not like playing video games at a desk. I spend all day working at this desk, man. Even a good Herman Miller can only support your lumbar for so long. When it's time to play a video game, I would usually rather sit my ass down on a big couch in front of a television, surrounded by speakers and kicking my feet up on the coffee table. I certainly don't have a few grand just to build a second gaming PC for the living room or whatever it is that the kids do these days. This isn't universal, obviously. I still play a whole bunch of games on the PC all the time. The Steam Deck has certainly opened up new possibilities as well, more or less building on top of the concept of the Switch. I don't think console gaming is dying or whatever, but I do find myself nervously waiting to see what these platform holders choose to do over the next few years, as it will, of course, have massive knock-on effects for the already destabilized development and publishing spheres across the industry pretty immediately. In some ways, it feels safer to develop for the PC first right now. People still have computers for presumably non-video game reasons. The major consoles share similar architecture, so porting after the fact is relatively straightforward. On the other hand, getting into PC gaming proper from square one is a massive upfront investment right now for a population primarily living paycheck to paycheck, myself included. But the consoles themselves aren't exactly providing the alternative that they used to. I don't know where I'm going with this, but shit feels really weird and shaky right now, and I don't like it. It didn't need to be this way, and it's immensely frustrating. It didn't need to get to this point. Remember when you wrote in and you said, well, Sony said they weren't going to... So yeah, I agree. Things are really weird right now, and this gets into some of the stuff I was talking about with regards to PC versus console, and as much as and I can be guilty of this sometimes, but like when people give the advice of just get a PC to people who are, you know, maybe not thrilled with where consoles are at, and these just get a PC. Like, that's easier said than done. We talked earlier about how there's just generations of people that are not going to be equipped to fix a PC. They're not going to be equipped to like upgrade a graphics card in a few years. Not that they necessarily need to, but, you know, they're also, you know, they might not care about this shit that much. They might care about it to the tune of $400 or $500, but not $1,500 or $4,000, or, you know, how, you know, if you want to go really nuts on a PC. And for them, that stuff I think makes a lot of sense, you know, where consoles are at. But it's, I guess, like, okay, a lot of people have cars. Not a lot of people have like hot cars. Not a lot of people drive supercars. Not a lot of people modify their cars, especially these days. It feels like there's less and less of that going on all the time. You know, you have a lot of fucking people out there that are just like happy driving a Tercel from place to place because it works and it gets them where they need to go. That's why we have half of the PlayStation active users still running a PlayStation 4, because it gets them where they need to go. Fortnite or Warzone, or, you know, whatever it is. And so you just have fewer and fewer people that want to be at the top end of that. You know, that are just like, no, I'm going to go get a McLaren, or, you know, or I'm going to go get a 4090. I've got the money for that, and fuck it. I care about this stuff that much. Or whatever it is. You know, you go look at the Steam hardware results in terms of what the most popular graphics card is. And it's like not even a 20 series card, is it? It's like a 16 something. Let's look again, because I think it just changed again recently. Yeah, here we have the April numbers. Okay, most popular video card is actually a 3060 with 5.5%. Below that is a 1650. So I think that just shifted. Like, the 1650 had been the number one for a long time. But, like, you know, very few people have whatever the fucking newest latest is when it comes to CPUs and GPUs, and they don't need them. I mean, if anything, the popularity of the Steam Deck is predicated on the idea that most people have not upgraded. Because if everyone had hot shit fucking brand new PCs with all the newest latest, developers would spec that a little more directly, and the Steam Deck would get left in the dust a little bit. That whole segment would probably get fucked over if everyone had hot PCs. And so I think I look at it as like, consoles are easy, PCs are not as easy as everyone who loves PCs likes to talk about it like it's going to be this incredibly easy thing, and you're gonna just be, and I think there are huge benefits to getting a PC and buying games off Steam. The sales, the situation with sales are more frequent, and it just seems like you are set up to get better deals on games more frequently, though the console digital stores have really caught up with that a lot over the last 5 years. It's still not quite there. And so the thinking on PC when you recommend it is always that idea of like, well, yeah, it's a bigger upfront cost, but you're going to make it up on the back end because games are cheaper. You're not paying a monthly fee for Xbox Live Gold or PSN or whatever else. And so you do eventually kind of make it up down the line. Of course, by the time you make it up, you then are like, well, this graphics card's not getting it done, baby. We've got to upgrade. And then, like, what do you do? Because you don't even know how to open your PC, let alone put a graphics card in it, right? I mean, like, if people can't navigate Windows effectively to the point where they've got to roll AI into this shit, they sure as shit are not going to put a card into their machine or upgrade a hard drive or any of that sort of stuff. They're just going to have to know somebody who's going to come over and be like, yeah, I don't know, this guy gave me 4 beers and I put a hard drive in his PC. And so I think consoles play a role somewhere in that mix, right? I just don't know where. And I do think that there's probably an increasing amount of room for someone to make a really good mid-spec pre-packaged PC, whether that's like a Steam Deck style portable or whether it's a Steam machine style thing of like it's going to boot into Steam OS or it's going to boot into big picture mode. You can hook it up to your TV. It's designed to be easy to use. And that is still a viable route to go, but I don't think anyone's really quite doing that. No one's selling that machine. No one's selling the gaming PC for the living room anymore, are they? Like there was a time there, even before the Steam machine came along, that people were trying to think about it and going, well, yeah, I mean, what if you bought this and hooked up to a TV, but like, Windows isn't there yet. Maybe it'll get there. They keep talking like they are well aware that Windows is not good on any of these handhelds or any of these kind of controller focused interfaces. So maybe, between the Xbox apps compact mode and whatever else, like maybe they eventually get there. And I think there's a case to be made for like the future of Xbox being something along those lines too, but it's a dicey proposition. But also, Andrew, I don't give a shit about, I can't remember the last time I sat on a couch and played a video game. I sit in this chair. It's either here or it's rotated towards that TV. When I was playing Hellblade last night, it was pivoted that way and I was playing on the TV. And then I realized I should just download the PC version. And so I did that. And then I started looking this way. But my eyes are going to shit. So I like having nice close monitors. Makes for better headshots. Than if I was sitting across the room from a 65-inch TV. Like, no. Need bigger screen or closer. Let's see. Let me get like 1 or 2 more emails in here. Lucas from Sao Paulo, Brazil, just writes in and says, is Shenmue Sega's 9/11? Yeah. I don't even know how to answer that. Sure. Yes. It is. Full reactive eyes entertainment. Can't melt steel beams. No, I don't know. Shenmue was very expensive for them to develop, but the Dreamcast was, I mean, you know, there were a lot of decisions they made prior to, you know, in the late Genesis era or 32X to Saturn. Like they made some choices a lot of different times that kind of got them on the road. I don't think Shenmue is really guilty of anything other than just not being an especially good game. An interesting one, a fascinating one. Steve from Royal Oak, Michigan writes in and says, I watch most of your stuff via your Twitch archive when I work from home. You keep me company on a lot of days, which I appreciate. I was wondering if you get anything from me watching your Twitch archive or if watching on YouTube is better for business. Yes, watching on YouTube is probably actually better for me from a business perspective, I think. I have Twitch archives currently turned off because I dared to stream DuckTales, and Capcom claims the music on DuckTales, and so like as soon as I hit stop, I got like 3 emails that were like, we've muted this and taken it offline, and we've turned off all of your archives. And I'm like, oh, all right. And I think I can now go in and turn them back on, but I don't. Personally, I think the Twitch VOD experience is really bad. And this stuff ends up on YouTube, and you should watch it on YouTube. I will probably turn that stuff back on at some point, but yeah, I don't know. My personal thought on it is I don't especially like the Twitch player and the Twitch VOD experience, and I think you should all watch on YouTube instead. Those are my thoughts on. Some people do still want to watch that version of it, and so I will probably turn them back on at some point when I can get some time to just go in there and do it. But my preference, personally, would be to funnel all of those numbers into one place or whatever it is. I don't know. At the end of the day, who the fuck knows? It's all a mystery. It's all some ridiculous algorithm thing. Have I thought about co-streaming to YouTube? Yeah, sure. I don't have the bandwidth to really do it right now. If they ever get around to installing crazy good internet in this part of which they're supposed to be sometime this summer, when and if that changes, I will probably start broadcasting more places. I don't want to use any of these services that will multi-stream for you because I don't want to add any additional latency. I like chat being pretty low latency. I think that's fun. And so yeah, I will probably multi-stream once I get the bandwidth to do it. Right now it's just a little funky, and it's bad, but you know, when you live stream to YouTube, the archive experience on YouTube of live streams I think is super bad. And so it's like, this is really good for Twitch is really great for live stuff, but I don't think their archives are great. YouTube's really great for archive stuff, and I don't think that their live experience is especially awesome. That's life. But I don't know, you know, fuck it. I'll broadcast to TikTok while we're at it, while I can. I don't know. Yeah, we'll get on Stickcam where it matters, where it really matters. The thing that matters, I mean, you know, like honestly, like that sort of stuff doesn't matter to me that much. If you want to help this enterprise continue to enterprise, Patreon is clearly the best way. You can learn more about it at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Sign on up. There is a free tier available, which is like, if you want to get notified, like sometimes I do post some stuff for free over there. I've been writing some articles here and there, and putting that stuff up on Patreon for free, but you would need to be a free member to see it, I believe is how that works. So you can go sign up for free, and then hey, if you flip over to, you know, subscribe in one of these days, please do. tell your friends, all that sort of stuff. Like that's, it's bad times out there. I want to do this for as long as I can do it. And it's been going great, and I would like for it to continue to go great. So sign on up. Can you do $1 a month? You can. There is the ability to sign up for, you can kind of throw whatever money at it you want. I think the benefits are set at specific tiers. But yeah, I've been trying to write stuff without putting like deadlines or like, I don't necessarily want to say I'm going to write one thing every week, because I think that's a really fast way to get really dumb articles when you're like writing to a deadline, or like, what am I going to write about? I got to find something. So like, but I've been trying to write stuff when things come to mind. And so I wrote a couple of things last week, and I've been putting that up on the Patreon as well. And more shows, Game Boys to Men, all that sort of stuff will be, those archives are there, and new shows will be there in the future. New Game Boys to Men. Probably once all of the Summer Games Fest stuff is out of the way, and everything. But yeah. But yeah. This is a long email from Parker from Houston, but we'll take it real quick here. The entire debacle over Sony requiring a PSN account for Helldivers 2 seemed kind of weird to me. I don't really understand why it received such a massive backlash, because I had to link my account the first time I played it. I didn't like it, but I've had a PSN account since 2009, so it wasn't a big deal. After the announcement, things went from zero to full-on moral panic in the blink of an eye. I saw people acting like Sony was going to steal their identities and their entire life savings, shouting about corporate greed, overreach, and data protection. People claiming that soon Sony would charge for multiplayer on PC, and people falsely threatening lawsuits on behalf of players living in delisted countries. If anyone said, and this sounds like someone posted on Reddit and was mad about it and then came to me, which I'm happy to be here for that, I guess. If anyone said anything remotely neutral or otherwise, they were branded a corpo bootlicker, a dick rider, a glazer, etc. All on platforms that require an account to use and harvest user data for sale. I spent a lot of my life being unreasonably angry online. I'm no better. I just don't get why this was the line. He goes on from there. A lot of people are playing Helldivers 2, and I do agree that like selling the game in territories where there were no PSN accounts and then trying to require a PSN account was a bad move on Sony's part. They really fucked that up. I suspect, like I said last week, I suspect their solution will be to eventually roll out PSN accounts in more territories, so that they can continue to make money on PC games, which is what they want to be doing. And then, yes, someone in the chat said what I'm about to say. This is my impression of it as someone who has not played a ton of the game, but it has definitely been something I've seen going around, is that the Helldivers 2 community is pretty fucking toxic. You could argue, yes, and then someone else is saying that every community is toxic. And I say, yeah, all right, yeah. I think there's something about the way that Helldivers 2 presents itself in terms of it's all of its fucking like, we're all these masked dudes for managed democracy. Like there's something about the tone of that game that I think also lends itself really well to people being extreme, not extremists per se, but like it's all or nothing with that game because they like it so much. They're passionate about it. Thanks for your passion. We hear you, like it's that type of community, right? And I think that's definitely part of it. I think people love it when it's going well and they're like having jokes about like, oh, the game master's tuning this and what about this? And there's like fun in that community. But the problem with having fun with a community is that the minute it goes south, they go all the way south on you. And you would think that people, and they shouldn't have to, but you would think that people that get involved in a community like as such would also, the humanization of the people in on the dev side and all of this, you would think that would lead to people being a little bit nicer and a little bit more understanding about things. But like people don't, there's no wait and see, there's no middle ground, or there's no like, let's see how this pans out, or like there's no like, well, that seems wrong, I bet they'll have to fix this. It's These people are the worst scumbags ever. I can't believe they would rob me. We're going to have to get a class action going. That's what we're going to do. And Reddit, I think, is actually really fucking, if you want to have people, if you want to see people fucking like mindlessly threaten class action lawsuits over video games all day, I always get the impression that fucking Reddit is the spot for that. If not the Steam message boards, but yeah, it's some of that kind of comes with the territory. We shouldn't have to deal with this. Like as a society, as game developers should never have to deal with this sort of shit. But like, it's just how it fucking goes. Like I read Reddit here and there. I try not to post. I think I posted yesterday. I think I fucked up, posted. But yeah, I don't know. In this case, I think that like the moves that Sony made were dumb and they were wrong. But I also think that like people who are now like, we're gonna go leave good reviews for the game now that you fixed this because now you've seen our power, I think is really quaint. There's more money to be made by not doing the account linking thing. But like they're probably gonna, again, my guess is that they need some time for lawyers and for some kind of development effort to take place in order to roll out PSN accounts of some sort in more of those territories. And when they do it, they will come back around and say, okay, we fixed the problem. And now all of you in territories where the game's been sold, now you can create a PSN account. And so you've got 60 days to do that. That's my guess. Because they're going to want the technological, they're going to want that to happen for tech reasons. Or they're going to have to re-engineer some entirely different solution and whatever else. But like if Sony wants to continue to sell games with multiplayer in them on Steam, on PC, this is going to be a problem that keeps coming up all the time. You know, and so their solution for Ghost of Tsushima was like, I guess we're going to limit it and just not sell it in those countries. But they want to sell the game in as many countries as possible because they're there to make money. So I assume eventually they will want to clear the pathway, clear the obstacles there, to ensure that they can eventually figure all that stuff out and get your email address and whatever else. And that they will probably be back to requiring PSN accounts on everything going forward. So we'll see. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks everybody for hanging out. What's going on? I don't know. X Defiant is out, and I do want to see how that turned out now that it's like quote unquote done. It's that game is interesting to me. And I want to see if they made any meaningful changes to it over the betas. I bet not, but hey, we'll see. I'll be back next week with another podcast. And of course, you know, Wednesday we'll play some games. Friday we'll play some games. We'll rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. All that stuff's up on YouTube. You can go to guard.bike if you want to get to the YouTube channel quickly and safely. Trust in Guard Bike. And I'll see you soon, everybody. Have a good one.